I become the Demon King in Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 351 Captain America, Civil War. Dear viewers, as you can see, New York is being ravaged by two macro people right now. Buildings have been destroyed, and residents have been killed. It's a horrific sight, yet the military, police, and so-called superheroes who are supposed to protect them have failed to intervene to stop the rampaging aliens. Instead, it seems as if they were about to start a different kind of civil war, and a named Eastern power immediately had mainstream media outlets expose the dark side of America, showcasing the cold-blooded nature of capitalist nations to its citizens and the world. This news report was timely and effective. Crucially, the American patriots provided a powerful assist, delivering a piece of unvarnished, unadulterated evidence that revealed America's true face. However, this publicity also confirmed SHIE's stance. Damn it, these two macro people aren't a test for SHIE. Tony Stark, in Hawaii, immediately realized, if SHIE wanted to use this opportunity to start a war, there would be no need to air this news item unnecessarily. Since the official response has been this critical, it's inconvenient to rush into war. Before any war breaks out, the nation instigating it either launches a stealthy attack, like the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, or they heavily publicize the target nation's brazen actions, positioning themselves as being forced to retaliate. For example, the day after the Gleiwitz incident, Tony Blair staged his own drama, in which he denounced Poland's brazen attack. If SWIE truly wants to fight, there's no need to produce such bland explosive news stories. It would be better to emulate Tony Blair and stage a drama. Since SWIE is still using its old tactics, it suggests they have no intention of starting a war. All the previous actions were based on wild guesses. Jarvis, prepare your suits. I'm going to stop them. Perhaps the arrival of the alternate Tony has irritated this universe's Tony, a proud and sensitive character. Since the other Tony Stark was already on the battlefield, it was only natural for him, the most powerful in the multiverse, to join the fight. He chose no side, focusing solely on the macro refutation of the Eastern superpowers' slander with concrete action. Tony wasn't the only one to grasp this. Carol Danvers, already in Washington state and having destroyed numerous Indian zombies, also received a message from her friend Maria Rambo at her farm headquarters. Realizing the two macro over New York weren't the work of SHIE, Carol abandoned her concerns and immediately soared eastward. Alicum, in hiding, couldn't hold her back. The world's attention was fixed on New York's Hell's Kitchen, as more and more extraordinary beings gathered. The three Captain Americas represented three different positions, each with their own supporters. Steve, aren't you getting too caught up in this? Tony from 2023 whispered in his companion's ear, don't forget our mission. This universe isn't ours, but this is America too. Steve from 2023 replied firmly, right now, America here needs our help even more. After all, using the time machine, he could return to the moment he left the main universe. He could stay here for as long as he wanted. As long as he survived, even in his 70s or 80s, he could return with the gems to save people. It was precisely with this premise that Steve desperately wanted to do something for America in this different universe. Although Tony Stark had evolved to a spiritual level capable of self-sacrifice, he still possessed some selfish tendencies, distinguishing between close and distant. In the main universe, Tony was willing to sacrifice a great deal. When he finally realized he was the only one who could save the world, he resolutely snapped his fingers for his family and friends. But in this unfamiliar universe, Tony couldn't be so selfless. The situation before him was clearly troublesome, and it would inevitably delay him significantly. His mind wasn't focused on this, as he didn't know anyone in this universe. Steve, on the other hand, was different. He loved America in every universe equally and was willing to dedicate himself to it. He wouldn't stop considering the Americans here as his compatriots simply because they had no ties to this universe. Seeing Steve's resolute stance, Tony had no choice but to accompany him. Looking around at the other two groups, Johnny Blaze, temporarily restored to his human form, sneered, Captain, you're right. The ruling class will never voluntarily step down. Change requires bloodshed. Only by clearing out this rotten garbage can America usher in a new future. It seems these people are enemies. Matt Murdock, who had retreated to the real captain's side, though blind, saw things more clearly than most. "Captain, why not take care of some of them while they were at it first to save trouble later?" The real captain, who had been silent until then, finally reacted and made a decision. He stepped forward, tossed the shield belonging to the Prime Universe Steve back to him, and then used magic to create a shield and a sword. "Since we can't convince each other, let's use our fists to enforce our own path." A book he'd read once contained a saying, "Political power grows out of the barrel of a gun." Having experienced war in the many things he'd seen over the past 3 years, the real captain believed this saying with all his heart. As he spoke, he dove into the centrist group, sweeping his sword across. Relatively speaking, this group was the weakest, so he'd eliminate them first. "Shit. His sword actually glows," Tony from 2023 exclaimed in surprise. The next moment, as the long lightsaber slashed through the bleeding edge armor, Tony realized that the sword not only glowed but also possessed terrifying power. The magical lightsaber ripped a gash in the bleeding edge armor, leaving a wound on Tony's abdomen. "Sir, you're injured," the AI Friday immediately alerted Tony, directing its excess nano-components to penetrate the wound, dispensing anti-inflammatory drugs and agents that stimulate cell division, accelerating healing. The real captain's movements were incredibly swift. With a single swing of his sword, he had already slain several eunuchs who had followed Coulson, until Steve, holding his shield with both hands, blocked his lightsaber. With a crack, the lightsaber slashed through the vibranium shield, creating a gash. What Thanos had done, the real captain could now do too. "Damn, he's so strong." Coulson was stunned, never expecting his childhood idol to have grown so far. "Steve, do you have any other trump cards?" Tony, no longer daring to engage in close combat and switching to ranged attacks, shouted to his teammates, "Use them now, or we'll have no chance." "If I had a trump card, I would have used it against Thanos." Steve was sent flying backwards by a kick from the real captain. "We're all Steve Rogers, why are you so weak?" Tony complained, drifting back and forth in the sky. With a bang, the real captain's shield swung from his left hand, striking the steel armor that dotted the sky like a fly. Another clear wound, another loss of nano-components. "Steve, look at him. He can take on all of us by himself. What are you going to do to stop him?" "Shut up." Steve rushed back and continued to fight the real Captain America, blurting out a famous quote from Captain America. "I could fight him all day." Chapter 352, The centrists and elites join forces to strangle the common people. "Good morning, Mr. Rogers." Tony Stark from 2023 flew over, using nano-components to stop the bleeding and treat his teammate, but he didn't forget to grumble. "Your day is over, he's too strong," Steve said in a deep voice. Before he could retort, his speed and strength far surpass mine, and he also wields a magical power. "I've discovered that his sword and shield are incredibly lethal. My armor can't stop them at all," Tony said in an equally grave tone. "If it weren't for his inability to fly," as he spoke, a pair of magical wings suddenly appeared behind the real captain, propelling him into the air. Tony remained silent, ignoring Steve's strange gaze. This is trouble. The situation was indeed unfavorable for them. The eunuchs brought by Phil Coulson were being eliminated one by the real captain. Steve's knowledge of the evil-defeating sword manual rivaled theirs. His all-clear physique allowed him to advance this sword technique to the highest level, making him the most accomplished swordsman of all. Combined with the magic imparted by Frigga and the added bonus from the Hull dimension, the true captain's strength far surpassed these eunuchs. Tony looked up at the fake captain across the street. He waited calmly, more and more armored suits descending around him from all directions, clearly intent on watching the fray from the sidelines. "Hey, the other Mr. Rogers, I think we could work together." Tony considered the fake captain. "Work together?" The fake captain gave a playful smile. Zhao Yi, who was leading the team, hiding in a roadside apartment, maintained communication with Lin Hao via Den Mushi. Another Den Mushi was constantly pointed downwards, relaying the live footage. At this moment, Lin Hao's voice could be heard over the video feed. "See? The people who really need him don't care whether he's real or fake. This is not the police catching a criminal. We must find out the real or fake. My plan does not require him to be confirmed to be real or fake before it can continue. Exposing the loopholes prepared in advance for the fake captain only makes it possible that the real captain, who has always been identified as from another universe, can be Captain America of this universe. You ask me who would believe that the fake captain is fake because of a mere question. Lin Hao laughed and asked Zhao Yi, then why do I need all Americans to believe that he is fake? You also see that no matter whether he's real or fake, there will always be people willing to use his identity. The American consortium is like this, and now this Tony Stark from another universe is the same. Do they care whether he's real or fake? They only care about the identity of the fake captain that can be used. Not only these people, in the future, everyone in America can choose to determine the authenticity of these three Captain Americas based on their own standpoints. All they want is an opportunity to wave the flag. Johnny Blaze and Matt Murdock chose to believe the real captain, and since then, their morale has been boosted. America's elite eagles have chosen to ignore the flaws in the fake captain and insist he's the real thing. In the future, do you believe Phil Coulson and the others will persuade Steve from another universe to step forward and stake his claim? It's like when someone suddenly appears in ancient times who looks exactly like the Emperor. There will definitely be ambitious people who will jump out and either confirm or deny he's real. For us, truth or falsehood isn't important, the chaos it causes is what matters. Don't you think this situation where truth and falsehood are so difficult to distinguish, where anyone can claim the responsibility, is more harmful to America? I understand, Zhao Yi nodded hurriedly. As Lin Hao said, authenticity doesn't matter, value is what matters. Faced with pressure from their own universe's real captain, Tony and Steve from 2023 automatically ignored the doubts about the fake captain and came to seek cooperation. Everyone's goal is to stop this guy and restore America to its former state, Tony shouted to the fake captain. So, why don't you cooperate? Cooperation requires merit, but you, the fake captain glanced at the two men from a distance, his face undisguised. You've been beaten so badly, what qualifications do you have to cooperate with me? Tony immediately shouted, I can help you upgrade your armor. Before the fake captain could react, the pilots around him, wearing various types of armor, erupted in excitement. Really? Someone immediately asked eagerly, can we upgrade to your nano armor? The Earthlings of this universe had long witnessed the convenience and power of nano armor on Ivan Vanko. Almost all the pilots who could only wear older models envied the Big Mao pilots' nano armor. Their armor, which could be done with a single button, was truly high-tech. Unlike theirs, which took at least several minutes and up to half an hour to don, and were prone to getting stuck in the crotch, who would understand? Of course, as long as you provide the necessary equipment and materials, Tony agreed readily. This universe was in shambles. Tony, from the main universe, no longer adhered to the principle of non-proliferation of armor. He was full of powerful men, so what would a few more pilots in nano-suits do? Besides, the good stuff stayed within the family. These people were still Americans. As a capitalist, Tony understood the origins of these armor pilots. While many among his fellow capitalists were indeed unethical, wasn't that what America had always been like? If he didn't support a capitalist elite, would he support armed reform? Tony had no intention of betraying his class. He could sacrifice himself to save others, but he would never betray the capitalist class. His self-sacrifice was a sign of his personal integrity, and his adherence to the capitalist class was because he believed it was the root of America's global dominance. Upon hearing Tony's response, all the armor pilots around the fake captain erupted in excitement, their gazes fixed on him. The fake captain had no doubt that if he dared to refuse, these obedient individuals would immediately change their positions and run to the other side. The powerful figures behind these pilots would immediately abandon him, choosing instead to support Steve Rogers, who clearly hails from another universe. Who could resist a nanosuit rivaling Big Hairs? When it comes to profit, positions can be changed. Alright, the fake captain agreed with a stern face. The pilots around him rushed forward impatiently. The two sides exchanged only a few words, and in an instant, the situation on the scene shifted again. The center and elite factions reached a consensus, joining forces to strangle the common people. Just as countless similar situations have occurred throughout history, the rise of the common people will inevitably be met with the attacks of the upper and middle levels of the pyramid, for they are all vested interests. Chapter 353 Spectators from all over the world, come on, more. The more intense the fight, the better. The combined might of the two factions was immense. Iron suits of all shapes and sizes, gathered from nearby states and counties, soared into the sky, charging towards the true captain at the other end of the street. The heat emanating from their legs scorched the air. Just in time, Johnny Blaze shouted. Flames erupted from his body, and the Ghost Rider descended once more. His flaming claws brushed against the chains, reigniting the flames. With a powerful pull, the chains snapped, transforming into flaming iron rings that flew like darts towards the airborne iron suit. This was a newly developed move by the Ghost Rider, capable of not only long-range attacks but also sleights of hand. The flaming iron rings danced through the air, controlled by Johnny, repeatedly striking the oncoming iron suit. Not to be outdone, Matt Murdock engaged his two short clubs, controlled by thin strings, in a back-and-forth exchange, though their impact was weaker, leaving only a shallow dent on the iron suit. This was the result of 2.5 years of arduous training. Before, they wouldn't have even had the strength to penetrate the gold-titanium alloy. Don't get close to them. Those transgender swordsmen can't fly and have no ranged attack capabilities, one of the iron armor pilots immediately warned. To maximize the use of supernatural powers, the previous federal government even had Tony Stark design a specialized swordsman armor. The Iron Legion has a dedicated team of eunuchs, capable of combining the uncanny power of the exorcism sword technique with the protective and firepower of the iron armor. Many of these pilots have witnessed the power of eunuchs. Even among the pilots supporting the Fey captain today was an eunuch pilot, well aware of the strengths and weaknesses of the exorcism sword technique. Machine guns, rockets, and energy blasts blazed from all directions. Even the speed of the real captain's eunuchs still resulted in casualties under this saturation fire. Fuck, the flaming Skeletor. In his skeletal form, he was immune to most physical attacks. Johnny increased the tempo of his attacks. Iron hoop darts streaked through the night sky, repeatedly colliding with the iron armor, raining down charred, tattered metal. The real captain, who was pursuing Phil Coulson and his swordsmen, saw his teammates injured and immediately turned, flapping his wings and soaring, sweeping his sword. His strength and the ability of his magic lightsaber to penetrate defenses far surpassed those of Ghost Rider and Daredevil. With a single strike, severed limbs and spurted blood, instantly staining the streets of Hell's Kitchen red. His nimble figure dodged and maneuvered through the air, his movements fluid and effortless. His sword and shield were unpredictable, his moves abounding, and every blow left a trail of blood. Captain America vs. the Iron Men. The drama was broadcast worldwide, giving the onlookers a thrilling spectacle. The fighting has begun, the fighting has begun, bleeding, bleeding, wow, that blood is sizzling, sizzling, that's clearly the sound of blood, sizzling, sizzling. Americans, the more brutal the fight, the better. With the entry of the experts, the pilots of the Iron Man suits suffered extensive damage. Those missing limbs could no longer maintain their balance, and at best, they retreated to the side of the road and fired a few reluctant shots. However, the real captain, with his enhanced perception, easily dodged them. This was his one-man show, but also an unequal slaughter. When the real captain demonstrated his true strength, the Fey captain and Steve from 2023 on the ground were even more shocked. They had known before that the real captain was stronger than them, but they had no clear idea of how much stronger he was. Only then, seeing him effortlessly navigate hundreds of Iron Man suits of various models, unleashing a one-sided slaughter, did they finally realize the terrifying extent of his opponent's strength. Mr. Rogers, I must advise you once again. We have no power over the affairs of this universe, Tony Stark from 2023 said hoarsely. If the man I fought 7 years ago had been this Rogers in the sky, I certainly wouldn't have stood a chance against Thanos. Steve from 2023, was puzzled. Why is he so powerful? Perhaps he's paid more, Tony sighed, continuing to advise his teammates. No matter what, it's clear we can't defeat him. While the bleeding edge suit was far more advanced than the older models in the sky, combat effectiveness wasn't simply a matter of numbers. Even he, the oldest pilot, could only handle 5 or 6 of the older models simultaneously with his bleeding edge suit. Any more would be a sure win, but the other one single-handedly slaughtered hundreds of them. Steve's feeling was even more pronounced. 7 years ago, he'd struggled to handle a single suit, while the other one was as effortless as cutting melons and vegetables. Their combat power was simply on a different level. Just as the two centrists were losing their fighting spirit, a figure swathed in colorful light suddenly darted across the western night sky. It's her, Carol. Tony was momentarily stunned, then overjoyed. Great. She's actually on Earth from this universe. 5 years prior in the main universe, Carol received a message from Nick Fury and hurried back to Earth, but Thanos had already snapped his fingers. However, Carol's subsequent display of fighting prowess still impressed the Avengers. It wasn't that they looked down on them, it was simply that even combined, they couldn't defeat one. Upon arriving, Carol rushed to her teammate Kelson. Seeing him wounded and bleeding profusely, and the surrounding streets littered with the bodies of her fellow swordsmen, she erupted in anger. Who did this? Though she was swift, she didn't have her Iron Man armor to broadcast the action live, so she had no idea what was happening. The two remaining masters pointed their finger at the real captain, who was now displaying his might in the air. Carol, without a word, soared into the sky. If I can't take down SHIE, how can I take down you? A glowing fist barreled toward the real captain. Though his reaction was quick, he needed to consider who he was facing, so he barely blocked it with his magic shield. With a crack, the shield shattered instantly by the fist. The fist, unstoppable, slammed heavily into the captain's left abdomen. The mid-air captain flew toward the street to the right, slamming into the buildings along the road, shattering several layers of wall and sending up a cloud of dust. This demonstrated the power of Carol's furious punch. As the saying goes, every force defeats every force. The real captain, who had just displayed his prowess in slaughtering the Iron Man pilot, was sent flying by a single blow from the newcomer. Are there any other experts? I love this kind of twist, more. The more intense the fight, the better. The international audience, eager to watch the action, was filled with excitement, grabbing popcorn, cola, fried chicken, potato chips, spicy noodles, chicken feet, and other snacks, as if they were watching a truly extraordinary spectacle. I worked overtime today and didn't get home until after 10 o'clock. I can still write one chapter. The third chapter will probably be written tomorrow morning. Chapter 354. The blood hasn't flowed into a river yet. Captain, seeing the real captain sent flying, Johnny Blaze and Matt Murdock rushed forward, attempting to intercept Carol's pursuit, but they couldn't even reach the taillights. The superhero team that finally rallied was reduced to just 2 or 3 crippled men in the blink of an eye. Anyone would be furious. So what about Captain America? Even if his stance remained the same, he'd killed so many of her teammates and still expected Aunt Carol to keep quiet? When had the cosmic police ever suffered such an injustice? Carol transformed into a streak of light and darted into the building on the street. Moments later, the sound of fists clashing against flesh could be heard from inside. Pa pa pa, pa pa pa. In the darkness, a man and a woman were alone. If the real captain hadn't lost his ability to charge, the teammates outside would have suspected something was amiss in the scene. There was some color, though. One glowed green, the other a multicolored, but there was no yellow glow, the familiar sight of the crowd. The real captain, blessed with super serum, inner strength, magic, and dimensional power, was undoubtedly a formidable force, but he was still no match for Big Mom's version of the monster. Lin Hao had sealed off the base universe with a massive formation, cutting off its connection to the Marvel Universe. All Captain Americas were unable to benefit from the forced 50-50 bonus. The real captain fought with great difficulty, but within moments, he was already in a bloody battle. Had it not been for his immortality, granted by dimensional control, he would have been shattered by Carol's furious fists. With a resounding boom, the high-rise building beside the road was ripped through by the two combatants. The bottom 2 floors were shattered, the walls, ceiling, and even the pillars destroyed, and the upper floors collapsed in an instant. The exclamations and screams awakened Carol, who immediately stopped chasing the real captain and rushed to the upper floors to rescue the people. Unfortunately, with only 2 hands and feet, she clearly couldn't save all the residents within the 10-story building. Carol turned to the surviving but terrified Iron Man pilots and shouted, "Help!" Aside from Tony Stark from 2023, who took to the skies without a word, the other pilots remained unmoved. Those worthy of donning this armor must be trusted aides of the powerful, most often brothers of families, some even illegitimate children of powerful families. Have you ever seen a master's trusted servants with a kind heart? Not bullying others is already considered good character, and that's only if the master is strict with them. They came to New York to provide support at the master's command, not to become superheroes. Would these people even appreciate a poor thank you? Shit, Carol was confused, but seeing their attitude, she gave up and decided to save as many people as she could on her own. Suddenly, 3 children on broomsticks flew out of the alley in the distance, each pulling out a short staff and swinging it at the collapsing building. Restore it to its original state. What technology can't solve, magic can. The restoration charm is undoubtedly the most practical spell in the Harry Potter universe, capable of restoring objects as small as eyeglass lenses or as large as entire streets and city blocks. With a wave of a wand by 3 young wizards on broomsticks, The collapsing building miraculously rose again, the damaged bottom 2 floors healing at a visible speed. Shattered and flying bricks and rubble flew back from all directions, automatically forming their original shape and then returning to the walls. Broken rebar, like noodles, reshaped itself, tucked neatly back into the cold concrete, ending this brief and playful escape. Wood, plastic, electrical wiring, pipes, and other building fixtures all returned to their original positions. Everything felt like a scene from a fairy tale, a dreamlike wonder. Tony Stark, who had just taken to the sky and hadn't yet broken through the glass window to rescue someone, was once again startled. What is this again? Less than a day into this strange universe, he had already encountered more surprises than in the previous 10 years. Thank you, 3 little wizards. Carol knew there was a new magic school in England, and having read numerous news reports, she had a good idea of Hogwarts's characteristics. It's you. The real captain recognized the 3 children he had met a year ago. Gwen Stacy's response to Carol's thanks was cold. Seeing the high-rise repaired, she sheathed her wand and cast a cold glance at the 2 worn parties. If you want to fight, do it from a distance. There are many ordinary people here. Carol's face was filled with embarrassment. She had been so enraged that she had ignored the residents of the surrounding buildings, and now she had to rely on 3 children to help clean up the mess. Let's go, Gwen called to her 2 companions. To the 3 little ones, the 3 Captain America's stance was irrelevant to them. They had simply come to rescue ordinary people and watch the excitement. These adults were fighting fiercely for their own interests, with no one caring about the innocent people being ravaged by the aliens. Even the Captain America she had met a year ago was too caught up in the fight to rush to the rescue. Children's perspectives differ from those of adults. They can't grasp the complexities of positional issues and can only see through the surface. Watching the 3 young wizards soar on their brooms toward the macro people in the distant night sky, several of the adults in Hell's Kitchen blushed with shame. We're even worse than a bunch of kids, the real captain, using his dimensional powers to heal his wounds, beckoned to his teammates. Go save them. Steve and Tony from 2023 immediately followed. They were the least skeptical in this universe, less wary, and more sympathetic toward the civilians. Carol flew back to Callison and his teammates, transporting them back to their spaceships before attempting to rescue them. The fake captain and the surviving Iron Man pilots remained unmoved, watching the real captain's actions intently. After all, that was their mission. As the lively and bloody battle drew to a close, the audience watched with a certain discontent. Is that the end? The blood hasn't flowed like a river yet, no way? Another old cliché of a sudden realization after seeing a child. Director, this scene isn't working. As if hearing their dissatisfaction, Shen Ran, the assistant director who had been hiding behind the scenes but believed he was the head director, finally stepped forward, intending to spice up the American superheroes. In reality, it was the newly emerged Carol who posed a significant threat to him. Therefore, Shen Ran wanted to use the 2 macro people to test her prowess. Makun and Nian, wreaking havoc in the distant city, suddenly stopped, turned around, and flew back towards Hell's Kitchen. Act 2 was about to begin. Chapter 355, A Second of Silence for Americans. Carol's display of fighting prowess truly astonished Shen Ran, who was hiding behind the scenes. The sight of the real captain slaughtering hundreds of Iron Man armors had already overwhelmed him, but now this woman suddenly appeared and crippled the real captain with just a few punches and kicks. Such a powerful character would pose a significant challenge to his plans, so he had to determine the limits of her abilities. The 3 little spiders on their brooms in front were surprised, as were Steve and Tony, who were hurrying behind them. The 2 aliens, who had been wreaking havoc in other districts, suddenly returned. Gwen, Ned, get out of the way. Although all 3 Spider-Men had been comprehensively enhanced, they each had their own strengths. Ned Leeds had enhanced defense and recovery, Gwen Stacy had increased speed and agility, and Peter Parker had the strongest spider sense, with additional strength enhancements. Working in perfect harmony, the 2 teammates immediately pressed their brooms and dove downwards to either side. The 2 massive creatures flew over at astonishing speed, their tails over 10 meters long barely brushing the faces of the 3 little spiders, and swung over their heads. Tony, hurrying along behind, was struck head-on, experiencing his first close encounter with a macro. Tony, Steve, trudging along on his own, rushed to his teammates. He was covered in wounds, cuts of varying depths and lengths by the eunuchs, both young and old. Every pull hurt, but he had to. Shen Ran, secretly manipulating the Macru, ignored the three imps and two superheroes from another universe, controlling Makun and Nian as they charged directly toward Carol. Carol, carrying the last injured teammate to the ship, saw the rapidly approaching enemy and, without further restraint, dodged and charged forward, delivering two swift uppercuts that sent the massive Macru soaring into the night sky. She clearly remembered the punishment she'd received from Gwen Stacy, and avoided impacting the buildings below. Shenran's expression darkened as he watched the alien prop being sent flying like a baseball. So strong, Carol's displayed speed and strength far exceeded his expectations. Fortunately, he wasn't a pushover. Without him making any move, the two alien monsters, which had clearly soared into the sky, suddenly returned to their previous position and continued to charge at Carol. What? This bizarre scene was beyond Carol's expectations. Even though she could fly at the speed of light, her reaction speed wasn't up to par. She couldn't dodge and was hit head-on by Makun. A figure plummeted from the sky, tumbling into a tall building beside the road, once again creating a hole in the outer wall. In a flash, Carol, enveloped in colorful light, rushed out again. She glanced at the advancing Macru, tossed her half-dead teammate back into the airship, then turned back to confront the two Macru. Macru possess numerous superpowers, including the ability to spit water and fire, and create strong winds with their wings. Combined with their powerful limbs and sturdy bodies, they could easily defeat the superheroes of Class 1. Unfortunately, Carol wasn't from Class 1 or Class 2, she was the top student in Class 0. Carol's flashy superpowers were completely ineffective. They either missed her at high speed or were ineffective, with no effect on her at all. She repeatedly struck two Macrus. Given her strength, even the strongest of them would have sustained injuries after repeated blows. However, these two Macros were like the constantly spawning monsters in a game. Even after being blasted away with all her might, they would reappear beside her the next instant, unharmed. Lin Hao, who had teleported to the skies above Hull's kitchen, carefully sensed the situation but shook his head. No time fluctuations. After 99 years of research at the end of time, Lin Hao had a thorough understanding of the temporal settings within the Marvel multiverse, otherwise, the world tree would not have been able to evolve. He sensed no temporal fluctuations here. Could it be the ability to make wishes? Lin Hao speculated. When Shenran wished to change his identity, the entire universe was stripped of his past. Was it the universe that was altered by him? That shouldn't be possible. He's not that high a status, is he? To put it another way, it's not the universe that was altered, but he stripped himself from it. Lin Hao had an idea, and he continued his analysis from this angle. The same operation as mine, stripping himself from the universe, thus escaping its influence, but doesn't that sound a bit invulnerable? Not so impressive, right? It should simply affect the wish or the person being wished for. Not bad at all. Lin Hao was intrigued, the way researchers are drawn to interesting projects. He had previously obtained information about the Son of God from the mind of Gu, the strongest of Macru. However, this Son of God, like the Skrull Super Skrull, had been a legend for millennia, little known to others. Director Lin didn't wait long, because Shenran, after probing Carol and discovering that her strength far exceeded his expectations, finally became anxious. Damn it! Where did this woman come from? When Carol was born, he had just joined SHI under a new identity and was naturally unaware of the confidential events unfolding across the ocean. Nick Fury wouldn't have revealed his true colors to him afterward, even though they both repeatedly claimed to be beloved friends and brothers. The powerful Carol interrupted Shenran's plans, forcing him to move on to the next step. After Carol struck two Macrus flying in the night sky, a sudden burst of blue light shot out from the top of a high-rise building in Hell's Kitchen, striking Nian directly. Floating in the air, Carol suddenly turned and flew towards the building she had been ignoring. This was the rooftop of the nightclub where Shenran was. A figure enveloped in colorful light crashed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, while Shenran, lying on the sofa, muttered to himself. When Nian, the holy son of the Macrus, merged into the orb in his chest, Shenran's body began to transform into a dragon, growing horns from his head, a tail behind him, and his hands and feet transformed into thick claws. At first glance, even the most insensitive person could tell who was behind the two Macrus who had been wreaking havoc in New York for most of the day. Asian, Carol hesitated at the fleeting sight of Shenran's features before his transformation, then shouted, "Who are you? What's your connection to SHI? If she hadn't witnessed Lin Hao shifting the stars with a wave of his hand, Carol wouldn't have cared much about a mere Asian. But now, she had to be cautious. When they'd seen the two macros appear in New York, these elite eagles had feared they were a test from SHIE, but when they realized it wasn't, they rushed over. But now, they had to confront an Asian man behind the scenes. It was better to be safe than sorry, which prevented Carol from taking immediate action. Shen Ran, now transformed into a dragon, didn't answer her, instead concentrating on reciting a wish he'd been brooding on for years. I hope America will become an independent kingdom. As his voice drifted out, Lin Hao, who was extremely sensitive to the laws of the universe, immediately noticed a startling shift in the American landscape. No way? This is even possible. Lin Hao didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and he observed a second of silence for the Americans. This was yesterday's. I've been so busy with work that I haven't found a chance to slack off. I still have 3 chapters to finish tonight, so I'll keep my promise. Chapter 356 America is blocked. I wonder how he still has the nerve to show up after witnessing the depths of the SHIEARD. Lin Hao was no longer in Hell's Kitchen in New York City, but on the eastern coast of the United States. He saw a thin film of light suddenly appear across the vast Atlantic Ocean, stretching from north to south, connecting the sky to the earth. A careful calculation of the distance between the film and the territorial baseline revealed a perfect 12 nautical miles. This wish actually complies with international law. Flying high into the sky and letting his senses run wild, Lin Hao discovered that the abruptly appearing film of light actually circled along the American border, enveloping the American territory in a spherical space, reaching high into the stratosphere and deep into the mantle. The film looked thin, yet incredibly strong. Lin Hao tested it with his hands and found that without the power of rules, even a punch strong enough to pierce the Earth's crust wouldn't be able to shake it. The Macru, after all, were an interstellar civilization that had been plaguing the universe for years. Even with technological means, they could create a similar containment shield, let alone the unconstrained superpowers of the Marvel Universe. Indeed, just as Shen Ran had wished, America had become an independent kingdom. Physically independent. America had been completely sealed off from Earth by this sudden appearance of a barrier of light. Interestingly, when Lin Hao teleported to Hawaii and Alaska, two independent American territories, he discovered they were similarly isolated by the barrier. The problem was, the 3 spherical barriers weren't connected. Furthermore, Shen Ran seemed concerned that excessive encroachment on Earth's space would provoke a strong retaliation from the Divine Spear Agency, so he didn't fully adhere to international legal definitions of airspace and territory when making his wish. The barrier's highest point barely touched the stratosphere, not extending further into the atmosphere. Its deepest point only reached the mantle, not the core. If the Earth were a glass bead, then 3 bubbles, 1 large and 2 small, had appeared within it, incredibly solid, impenetrable by ordinary means. Looking down at the Hawaiian Islands below, still immersed in the bustling night market, still unaware of the situation, Lin Hao shook his head. Those wealthy Americans who had taken refuge on the islands to escape the Civil War were doomed. America itself is vast and sparsely populated, with a well-developed ecosystem and supply chain. Even if blockaded, it can still sustain itself, at most returning to a state before the discovery of the Americas. Frigid Alaska also offers arable land, and with a sparse population, it's possible that new social structures could evolve over the next few years. After all, humanity has evolved over hundreds of thousands of years, and its tenacious adaptability can even surprise humans themselves. However, the Hawaiian Islands, with their limited land area and the influx of wealthy Americans seeking refuge there, have long exceeded the land's capacity to sustain them. Furthermore, years of tourism development have eroded the archipelago's agricultural potential, making a return to agrarianism impossible even if the islanders wanted to. Normally, caravans deliver the food, beverages, and even luxury goods needed by the wealthy by plane and cargo ship. Now that they're suddenly blockaded, a massive humanitarian tragedy is sure to follow. Tisk, there's going to be something interesting to watch. Lin Hao certainly had the ability to rescue these people with a wave of his hand, but why would he do that? These so-called upper-class Americans have done very few things that matter to humanity. In a flash, they teleported back to Hell's Kitchen in downtown New York City. On the top floor of a nightclub, Carol heard Shen Ran muttering, but since he was speaking Chinese, she could only make out a few fragments. Even if she could understand, Without knowing his abilities, she couldn't imagine what meaning these words held. It wasn't until Shenran made his wish, regained his human form, and revealed a smug smile that Carol realized something was amiss. But she didn't notice the changes around her until a sudden explosion echoed from the distant sky. A plane, en route to landing at a New York airport, swooped down from its high altitude and collided unprepared with a transparent film. This incident was evidently not the only one. As the three spherical films enveloped the continental United States and two overseas states, numerous collisions and even slicing occurred among planes, ships, cars, and trains crossing the border. People, animals, and cargo perished in a variety of ways. They were blown to pieces, burned to death, drowned in rivers and seas, and even engulfed alive in the chemicals after the vehicles transporting them shattered. And there were the lucky few whose bodies remained half in America and half outside. The miraculous power of chance revealed itself at this moment. Seeing the explosion high in the sky, Carol glared at Shenran, then soared into the sky, reaching the height of the film in the blink of an eye. In her eagerness to save the life, she failed to notice the sudden appearance of the film and crashed headfirst into it. Her round face pressed against the transparent film, appearing even larger. Wow! Carol, unharmed, regained her composure and reached out to touch the film. While the other side was still smeared with aviation oil and burning fiercely, she felt no heat from the inside, only a slight chill. What the hell is this? The slight chill of her palms didn't bother Carol, but the endless film of light she saw sent a chill through her bones. No way! Realizing what was happening, Carol instantly erupted with a powerful burst of colorful light, initiating light-speed flight. She followed a film of light high in the sky from east to west. Soon, she was flying from the east coast to the west coast, and sure enough, she saw a film of light stretching from the sky to the ground across the Pacific Ocean. Undeterred, she continued along the west coast from north to south, reaching the southern border of the United States. Then, she continued along the border from west to east, finally turning back to New York in the northeast. America is being blockaded. Carol was stunned, refusing to believe it. You're kidding? Confirming this, she rushed to the film of light and punched it down. 80, 80, 80. No matter how hard she punched, the seemingly thin film remained motionless. I don't believe it can't be broken. Carol, furious, unleashed the dual star force, raising her dazzling fist and smashing down on the film. This time, it finally reacted. He was, after all, the Marvel God, known as the second best and most powerful among all Earth superheroes. His dual star force, unleashed with such power it could ignite extinguished stars, naturally enough to shake the superpowers of the Macru. But as the film before him trembled under Carol's blows, a surprising change occurred. Stop hating, Tony Stark from 2023 soared high into the sky, his face darkening as he shouted at Carol, "Knock on, or the North American continent will collapse." Having noticed the explosion high in the sky, Tony, also soaring high in his suit, naturally spotted the sudden appearance of the film. He wasn't as fast as Carol, so he only had time to check the area around New York City. But seeing Carol's frantic expression, he realized the outcome. Hearing the shout, Carol turned and looked back at the American continent. She saw that the entire continent had been shaken by the tremors caused by the light film. Mountains and rivers were shaken violently, and countless people and animals were killed and injured. "God, I won't fight you anymore," Carol pleaded with a sad face. "Please save America." Chapter 357. This time I'm going to die. If Carol continued to smash down, relying on the power of the binary stars, she could indeed destroy the film of light Shenran had constructed with the supernatural powers of the Macru people. However, the film had already penetrated deep into the Earth's mantle and needed to be broken through in an instant, otherwise the tremendous impact would spread along the film throughout the American continent. It was hard to say whether other continental plates would be affected, but the American continent would definitely be destroyed. Unfortunately, this mysterious film of light wasn't the type that would cause a complete collapse instantly after a small breakthrough. If it had to be peeled off piece by piece like demolishing a building, it would be fatal. Once the film was removed, the American continent would be shaken into a bowl of quicksand, with seawater pouring back and magma overflowing. Wow, what a hot pot! Realizing this, Carol extinguished all the colorful lights on her body. She seemed to have lost all light, dim and lost, pitiful and helpless. "I can't become America's sinner, don't lose heart," Tony, floating beside her, advised. "We'll find a way." How did this membrane appear? What did you find upstairs? Carol's speed was so great that by the time Tony's attention shifted from Makun, another Makru, Carol had already burst through the rooftop of the nightclub and soared high into the sky. Tony had no choice but to fly in to take a look, but saw no one. Shenran was no idiot. After witnessing Carol's immense strength, he knew he couldn't defeat her, so he retreated and changed his identity again. This move had gone undetected by even Lin Hao and the SHIE Bureau, let alone American superheroes like Carol. Shenran's original plan was to wait until America was in chaos, with most of its powerful members dead or injured, and then, once he had sufficient power to suppress it, he would make this wish and create an independent kingdom, his own. By then, no one in America within the bubble would be able to challenge him, forcing him to wield his power. Unless other nations outside the bubble wanted to destroy the American continent or even watch the impact on other continents by resorting to large-scale nuclear bombing, they could only watch him establish himself as king. However, the appearance of the super-powerful Carol derailed Shenran's well-thought-out plan, forcing him to make a wish in advance. Fortunately, he possessed the longevity trait of the Makru people, so he doubted this white-skinned woman could outlive him. Oh, I was careless. Having changed his identity once again, Shenran didn't actually go far, appearing in another building in Hell's Kitchen. He retrieved the Makun in mid-air before teleporting away. His curiosity and unwillingness led him to use the Makru people to test Carol's strength, but this also forced him to expose himself. However, these two Makru people, especially the younger one, were extremely useful to him, ensuring the full realization of his wish-granting power. He absolutely could not abandon them. Otherwise, he should have left, waiting for an opportunity for Carol to leave the American mainland before making a wish, sealing her off and leaving her anxious. Now trapped in the American mainland, Carol had lost his largest territory. I can only go to Alaska first. As a user of his ability, Shenran could naturally come and go freely and wish for the light film to disappear. Otherwise, wouldn't that be self-defeating? High in the sky, the two were completely unaware that the person they cared about had left. Even at the moment Shenran made a new wish to change his identity, Carol had forgotten every moment she had seen Shenran on the rooftop of the nightclub. So, faced with Tony's question, Carol looked bewildered. What happened? Tony frowned and pressed on. Just now, you rushed into the rooftop of the nightclub. Didn't you see anyone there? Who? Carol tried to recall, but she couldn't remember at all. No one. What? Tony was incredulous. No, I don't remember. Carol covered her head and rubbed it vigorously, trying to recollect. Shit. What the hell just happened? If Tony hadn't caught up and pointed out Carol's movements, she would have simply dismissed her trip to the nightclub rooftop as just another ordinary activity, like eating, going to the bathroom, or walking from the apartment building to her front door, so routine that she wouldn't have bothered to remember it. But now that such a strange light pattern had appeared, and Tony had explained that her experience on the nightclub rooftop might be related to the sudden appearance of light, Carol connected the two and began desperately trying to recall them. However, her unpredictable superpowers had already stripped her of any relevant memories. What the hell just happened? Seeing Carol lose her composure again, Tony had to stop pressing her and gently advised, if you can't remember, forget it. Let's go down and gather everyone to solve this problem together. Carol was a key player in the fight. If she lost her composure, it would weaken their ability to withstand risks. In this situation, a superpower could solve many future problems. When they returned to the surface, the battle between the three Captain Americas had temporarily subsided. Just now, the ground shook, and large swathes of tall buildings collapsed in the surrounding neighborhoods. The real captain had ordered his teammates to disperse and rescue people. Steve from 2023 readily followed suit, but the fake captain and the remaining Iron Man pilots remained indifferent. The three little magicians were the busiest ones, rushing around casting restoration spells. However, they could only repair damaged buildings and streets, not the injured or even dead. Seeing Tony flying back, Steve hurried over to ask, what happened? A film of light appeared at an altitude of 15,000 meters. This film covered the entire continental United States, sealing it off. Tony's numb voice echoed. Everyone was stunned by this answer. Steve from 2023 sternly scolded him, Tony, what time is it? You're still joking like that, haha. Tony laughed weakly, and had Friday project a 3D model of the continental United States, highlighting the abruptly appearing film. I wish I were just kidding. Everyone was stunned as they saw the bright red film covering the diorama of the American mainland. He's right, I've circled the border. This film, stretching from the stratosphere to the ground, has sealed off America, a distraught Carol defended Tony. The earthquake just now was caused by the impact of me hitting the film. You're kidding? Peter Parker refused to believe it, couldn't believe it. Ned Leeds, a man of action, was about to use apparition, but when Stacy shouted, "Let's talk about it back home, one more chapter to go, I'll finish it before I sleep." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 358, Captain True. This is a great opportunity for America to be reborn from the ashes. The three youngsters reacted differently. Peter Parker was in disbelief and unwilling to accept it. Ned Leeds, however, planned to attempt apparition immediately. He had the greatest magical talent and the most accumulated magical power. While he couldn't travel intercontinentally, he could try to reach Ottawa, where he had once visited. Gwen Stacy, on the other hand, was the most mature, her sensitivity allowing her to consider things more comprehensively. If what these people said was true, and America was indeed under blockade, then everyone desperately needed a way to leave. It would be fine if Ned failed to apparate, but if he succeeded in leaving in front of so many people, the magically gifted men would surely be devoured by the trapped Americans. The very people before them would make it impossible for them to let them go. Having witnessed a dark side of human nature during previous semester missions, Gwen no longer harbored any naive illusions about it. Moreover, the civil war they had just witnessed had fully demonstrated the indifference and selfishness of adults. Ned didn't quite understand these complexities, but he was used to listening to the two captains, so he gave up on casting his magic immediately. Only the real captain glanced at the three, but his own shock quickly overwhelmed his thoughts. Captain, base, Johnny Blaze reacted quickly, realizing that while mainland America was under blockade, their base wasn't there. He was used to the real captain opening a portal to their base in hell at any time. But this time, the real captain's face was grim, and he shook his head silently. "Can't open it?" Johnny's face changed. "No," the real captain said gravely. "What then?" Johnny panicked, then immediately thought of another idea. How about calling Asgard and trying the Bifrost? They had used the Bifrost to evacuate survivors in Houston before, and Johnny had the good fortune to go to Asgard with them. "Let's hear everyone's ideas first." "Don't worry," the real captain reassured him. Turning around, the three little ones were gone. The three little ones quietly departed, flying on their broomsticks towards Gwen's villa. Upon arrival, they found the villa also in ruins, evidently due to the extensive damage caused by the recent earthquake, even affecting low-rise buildings. Fortunately, they had sent Aunt May to hide in the sturdy and well-stocked basement before leaving. Gwen, after restoring her own villa, followed her companions into the basement. "Aunt May, it's me," Peter shouted before descending. Aunt May, hidden inside with her gun in hand, breathed a sigh of relief. "Peter, Gwen, Ned, are you all right?" "We're fine, but something terrible has happened in America." Peter's chatterbox nature erupted, and he began to explain what had happened to Aunt May. "Oh my God." Aunt May covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes glazed over. Gwen turned to Ned and said, "Try parading here, okay?" Ned took a deep breath, clearing all thoughts. A moment later, Ned had successfully vanished. Gwen and Peter, who had already shut up, looked delighted. A second later, Ned returned. "Yes, I made it to Ottawa." Gwen and Peter were overjoyed, the latter jumping for joy. "Great. We won't be trapped." Gwen then spoke again. "Go and retrieve all the portkeys." Ned, puzzled, but dutifully followed his instructions. He first went to the Hogwarts teleportation room in New York to retrieve the unassuming portkey. Then, following the node locations that Headmaster Tom had shown them, he circled across America, retrieving the portkeys from several important cities. These nodes were within Ned's reach. They had been specially set by Headmaster Tom to facilitate the three of them experiencing the dark side of the American mainland. To transform the Spider-Man trio, Headmaster Tom faithfully carried out his master's orders. After their circuit, Ned, nearly exhausted, collapsed on the basement sofa, gasping for air. Gwen fetched him an energy drink from the refrigerator and stepped forward to collect all the portkeys in a small leather bag, cast with a special expansion charm. "Gwen, what are you trying to do?" Peter asked, bewildered. yet still showing concern for the ordinary citizens of America. Are we going to save them? Wait a minute, I need to go back to school and talk to the principal. As she spoke, Gwen produced a glass orb-shaped portkey. Magic surged, and it vanished, the glass orb landing on the sofa. As the three little ones were plotting, the three Captain Americas in Hell's Kitchen sat on opposite sides, listening to the two Tony Starks analyze the current state of America. That's right, this universe's Tony had finally arrived in New York from Hawaii. He was the worst off. He had the option of avoiding the lockdown, but upon arriving on the mainland, he was enveloped by a light barrier. He hadn't even realized Hawaii was also under lockdown, and his girlfriend, Pepper Potts, was in imminent danger. All electronic signals have been blocked. Currently, nothing but light can penetrate this film, not even at the molecular level. The film is very strong. Carol just tried, and it can't be shaken unless she unleashes her full power. However, if she unleashes her full power, the impact will be transmitted throughout the American continent, causing an earthquake and destroying America. It's late at night, and the people are still unaware. At dawn tomorrow, residents along the border will be the first to notice the anomaly, and then the news will spread across the country through domestic lines. Haha, if the people knew the entire United States was under blockade, there wouldn't be a civil war, just destruction. Is there any way to leave? The fake captain's first words were these. This was his own thought, and also the thoughts of the remaining armor pilots behind him. In this situation, they didn't care about the lives of their people or the orders of their masters. Leaving this dangerous situation as quickly as possible was the top priority. If I had thought of this, I would have left by now, Tony from 2023 said angrily. What the hell? They clearly didn't belong in this universe, and they hadn't even figured out why they were there, yet they were forced into such a mess. Billions of Earthlings and countless other beings were waiting to be rescued. The fake captain's expression immediately darkened. Let's think about how to deal with tomorrow, Steve from 2023 said hoarsely. Once residents along the border notice something's wrong, people from other regions will likely flock to the border for inspection. New York isn't far from the maritime border, Captain. Since we can't leave for now, we should first secure the supply warehouse, a pilot from the fake captain's armor reminded him. The fake captain's eyes flashed, and he immediately turned and headed out of Hell's Kitchen. The other pilots naturally stood up and followed. Captain, it's time for us to prepare too. We need more supplies, Johnny Blaze said to the real captain. The elites only wanted to protect themselves, while the common people wanted to save more Americans. Seeing the two of them minding their own business, Steve from 2023 couldn't help but curse. Fuck, at this point, can you guys just let go of your stance? I think this is a great opportunity for America to be reborn from the ashes. The real captain glanced at the centrists and strode away. Shenran has several superpowers in the comics, but they're all just fancy stuff. He can make wishes, but they rarely work in the comics, so I had to create my own. The Marvel editor's point is, even if Chinese characters get good powers, they're only capable of this kind of idiotic behavior. Chapter 359 American Purgatory. When the sun rises, everyone must face a new day, even if it marks the beginning of the end for Americans. The first to notice something unusual is the men and women drifting off the coast of Hawaii, partying all night. Civil war has broken out in the United States, sending conglomerates and citizens of modest means fleeing. Major capitalists with overseas estates and fiefdoms relocate their families, waiting to return to the U.S. once the dust settles. Less affluent individuals take the opportunity to embark on extended vacations. Hawaii, known as the overseas state, is particularly popular among wealthy Americans, becoming a preferred refuge for those with less wealth or unwilling to leave the U.S. It offers a pleasant climate, comprehensive amenities, and abundant tourism resources. Crucially, it eliminates the hassle of obtaining visas and the harassment of once fawning foreigners who now wield the power. Following the Civil War, coastal ports gradually tightened controls. The once bustling yacht clubs, once bustling with revelry, were driven out by the navies of both sides, leaving the young men and women feeling dejected and unable to enjoy themselves. So, they all converged on Hawaii, hosting a daily sea and sky feast. Needless to say, after gathering together, partygoers from across America racked their brains and creativity to outdo one another, resulting in an even greater merriment than ever before. It's true that shared joy is worse than shared joy. What? You're saying there's a war going on back home, and many citizens have lost their livelihoods, starving, destitute, and suffering the ravages of war? And countless young men are sacrificing their lives on the battlefield? What does that have to do with us? No, it seems, it does. Don't worry, after we win the war, we'll return to take over the territory and provide you with jobs. Don't worry, just bear with me. Hey, someone, remember to prepare your speech in advance, and make it expressive. Come on, play the music, and dance. History repeats itself countless times, but this time it's different. The hungover young men called out to the captain, who'd been partying with them the night before, "Get up and sail back to the island." The captain, equally dazed, the alcohol barely evaporating from his bloodstream, stumbled to the wheelhouse, started the engine, took the helm, and dribbled the boat halfway. With a clang, the three-story yacht suddenly collided in the open sea, colliding with an invisible film of light. "Sparrow, what the hell?" the young man who'd hosted the previous night angrily scolded. "Are you using all your energy on a woman?" Captain Sparrow, sobering a little, hurried to the side window of the wheelhouse. He saw the port bow severely deformed, as if it had struck something. But looking out, the sea was empty, there was clearly nothing. Rubbing his eyes, Captain Sparrow returned to the helm, intending to turn the yacht around again. However, after restarting the engine, the port bow continued to deform, seemingly forcing its way through something. A piercing sound, accompanied by the trembling of the ship, startled the naked young men and women aboard, as well as the countless heads and legs of the chickens and rabbits. Ouch, shit. Who stepped on me down there? It's broken, fuck. My breasts are bursting. After a flurry of activity, the host, clutching his bleeding forehead, burst into the wheelhouse, lashing out with curses. "Son of a bitch, you're fired, boss." Ship hit ship. Captain Sparrow couldn't describe what he saw, he couldn't even see what the ship had struck. Following his trembling hand, the young man gazed out the window. All he saw was a vast expanse of sky and sea, but the bow of the ship seemed to be deformed by an inexplicable force. The water in the distance was also problematic, its heaving was inconsistent. Water from one side surged towards the other, but it couldn't get past it, as if blocked by some barrier. What the heck? The young master hastily opened the door and ran to the front deck. He reached out boldly and touched the deformed bow, only to find a slightly cool, transparent membrane. He'd broken that membrane many times before, but this one was destined to be unbreakable. Shit, what the hell is this? The young men and women on board were startled, their drunkenness wearing off as they flocked to the bow to witness this bizarre and strange spectacle. Damn, what the hell is this? Can we get in touch with the island? Can we sail? If we can, we'll go back. The chickens and rabbits, who were far more numerous, naturally had no say and huddled in the cabin, anxiously waiting. Fortunately, the yacht's engines were located at the rear, so the deformed bow didn't affect its ability to sail, only slowing it down. When they returned to port, Captain Sparrow wasn't fired, but he was out of a job. Chaos had broken out on the island. As returning tourists brought back news, the islanders learned that a mysterious film of light had appeared offshore, completely encircling the entire Hawaiian archipelago. Those with the necessary skills began to verify the situation, those in panic kept dialing, and those with quick minds rushed to the mall. Inside a beachfront villa, Pepper Potts inquired about the main system Jarvis had installed. "Can you get in touch with Tony, Ms. Potts? The signal can't get through. I've lost contact with the space server. The island's local area network is still functional, but the submarine fiber optic cable connecting to the mainland has been severed." A roar of jet engines echoed as an unmanned armored vehicle returned from high altitude, bearing new information. "Ms. Potts, an unknown film of light appeared at an altitude of 15,000 meters, completely encircling the entire Hawaiian archipelago. We've circled the islands, but we haven't found any loopholes." Pepper was stunned and incredulous. "You mean Hawaii is under lockdown?" Jarvis projected a 3D model, more vividly illustrating the crisis facing Hawaii. Seeing the unknown film of light that enveloped the Hawaiian Islands like a giant bowl, Pepper was bewildered, unable to think. "What is this, Ms. Potts? This film is incredibly strong. I've used every weapon in my iron armor, and it's impervious. This means we're trapped here for a while, so I suggest immediately constructing a defensive perimeter around the villa to prevent the mob from attacking. This is the first reaction of wealthy Americans when faced with a social crisis. Use weapons to protect yourself first. Wait for the government and military to rescue? Haha, by the time they arrive, they'll just be collecting bodies. Besides, Weakening the federal government's prestige and deliberately sowing distrust in the American government is a fundamental national policy of these wealthy people. Deceiving others is enough, but are they going to deceive themselves too? Also, the villa must be sealed off immediately and an internal air circulation system established, Jarvis emphasized. The air in the blockade area will become turbid, and harmful gases will increase significantly. Huh? Pepper was bewildered. Shouldn't we be stockpiling food and water, Mr. Stark has already stockpiled enough food and water in the pantry to sustain the 5 people in the villa for 50 years, when Tony was still there. In addition to him and his girlfriend, the villa housed bodyguard Happy, an elderly female cook, and an equally elderly female maid. To prevent any unforeseen events, Tony had already prepared supplies. Food is scarce on the island, and if the conflict escalates, a large number of bodies will be left. If the authorities fail to maintain basic urban functions and properly dispose of the bodies, the natural decomposition of the bodies, combined with the inevitable fires associated with the unrest, will generate a large amount of toxic gases. Marine algae produce over 70% of the oxygen produced by vegetation on Earth through photosynthesis. I hadn't noticed this before. Sorry. However, the dissolution of carbon dioxide into seawater is extremely slow, meaning that algae within 12 nautical miles can only utilize the existing carbon dioxide in the seawater for photosynthesis. Therefore, widespread hypoxia will not occur before people starve to death. However, the toxic gases in the closed area cannot be discharged either. Chapter 360 American Purgatory. America itself is vast and sparsely populated, boasting diverse landforms such as forests, grasslands, rivers, and lakes. Sunlight can penetrate the solar membrane, allowing the continent to maintain its ecological cycle and gradually develop a new internal circulation system. Shen Ran, intent on establishing his own independent kingdom, not a lifeless wasteland, had already planned all the details over the years. After all, he had received 9 years of compulsory education and understood the role of ecological cycles and the structure of atmospheric circulation. Sunlight shines on water and rivers, lakes, and oceans, evaporating it into vapor, which rises to form rain clouds. Uneven heating of the ground causes differences in air pressure. The horizontal pressure gradient forces air from high-pressure areas to flow toward low-pressure areas, forming winds. While a large area like the American mainland, being blocked off from the external weather system, does indeed cut off its connection to the surrounding climate system, it can gradually develop an internal circulation system. While this will inevitably impact the environment, potentially leading to the collapse of ecosystems and the death of large numbers of plants and animals, adaptable humans can gradually adapt. Alaska and Hawaii, however, are different. Their relatively small size and simple landscapes make them unable to develop independent circulation systems. Alaska's vast land mass, sparse population, and presence of boreal forests and ferns should ensure its survival for many more years. Hawaii, on the other hand, is in dire straits. Hawaii is an archipelago in the ocean, with limited vegetation to begin with, mostly low shrubs. Large-scale tourism development has essentially converted the land to commercial and residential use. This pure consumer island relies heavily on imported goods, requiring no agricultural areas and previously offering no consideration for air quality. Is this a complete madness? This is the heart of the Pacific Ocean, subject to frequent storms. This isn't a closed underground building, with incredibly good ventilation. Even if an air pollution incident occurs, the toxic gases will be quickly carried away by the storm. Even buildings above ground can be swept away by typhoons, let alone the toxic gases lingering in the air. Over the years, Hawaii's urban planning has considered earthquakes, fires, tsunamis, wars, plagues, continental collapses, and even monster attacks. But the only thing it hadn't considered was a situation where a solid barrier blocked off, preventing even air from circulating. No one had considered this, and the designers, believing that such technology didn't exist on Earth, naturally didn't prepare a plan. Jarvis, an artificial intelligence, excels at collecting, analyzing, and determining the probabilities of certain scenarios. After assembling this information, it suddenly realized that the blockaded Hawaiian Islands would not only lack food and water, but even clean air would become a luxury in the future. This is because the islands are currently overcrowded. Previously, the permanent population of the Hawaiian Islands was around 1.3 million, but it has now exploded to nearly 3 million, far exceeding the land's capacity. After the outbreak of the American Civil War, Countries around the world tightened their immigration controls on American refugees. Canada and Mexico went one step further, imposing stringent requirements on Americans attempting to enter the country, such as requiring them to deposit a certain amount of funds in banks under their control. When had Americans, accustomed to a life of superiority, ever suffered such injustice? Consequently, residents of the war zone fled to states unaffected by the fighting, and unlikely to be affected in the future. Hawaii, with its remote location and pleasant climate, became a top destination, attracting both wealthy and poor, filling up hotels. Attractive men and women found it convenient, they could live there rent-free by complying with some of the landlord's demands. During the months of the Civil War, prices in Hawaii had risen several times, forcing the middle class, unable to afford it, to leave. But would the wealthy care whether a meal cost $5 or $20? With a frivolous middle class driven out, only the wealthy remained, along with the attractive men and women who depended on them for survival. These people had ample funds, so naturally, trading companies brought in all sorts of supplies. The Southwestern Confederation capitalized on this opportunity, making a fortune while also wooing these individuals and building a network to replace the Eastern Confederacy. I've accessed the systems of various trading companies and the Taiping fleet and obtained their supply records for the past month. Analysis reveals that if used sparingly, the island's food and water could last another month. However, this blockaded area is completely cut off from the outside world. Even now, after the blockade was discovered, large-scale riots have broken out in the city, with injuries occurring frequently. Future conflicts are only expected to intensify. Conflict inevitably leads to casualties. If bodies are not properly handled, they will naturally decay, producing large quantities of harmful gases. Burning corpses consumes precious fuel and inevitably produces toxic gases. Even if the bodies are dumped into the ocean to be decomposed by microorganisms, it still requires manpower. Organizing civilian labor means the authorities must pay for food, but will they waste their extremely limited supply for this? Furthermore, the inevitable fires that occur during riots are the greatest source of toxic gases. Desperate people will commit many self-destructive acts, playing with fire being the most common. The self-purification system within the blockaded area is unable to process the toxic gases produced. The purification rate far outstrips the rate of production. The military will definitely control supplies in the future and watch the civilians fight. Only after the majority of the civilians are consumed can they rely on the stored food to last longer. Forced to accept reality, Pepper immediately asked Jarvis, "Are there any materials in the warehouse to renovate the villa, Mr. Stark has a lot of supplies stored in the warehouse. I can design a renovation plan using the existing materials. We also have 10 armors and replacement reactors, enough power to last for hundreds of years," Jarvis replied. "These 10 armors will be our military guarantee to resist military pressure in the future." Happy ran into the house and reported, "Miss Potts, the streets are in chaos. Everyone is scrambling for food and water. Don't go out anymore. Jarvis is in charge of the outer defense. We must seal the house as soon as possible." Huh? Happy was confused. The air on the island will soon deteriorate. Pepper forced herself to steel her resolve. She could already see the cruel scene of the islanders grappling with their hands around their necks in agony. It was obvious that violence was about to break out, and a firefight was inevitable. The Hawaiian authorities were lucky to be able to handle the wealthy individuals who came to complain, but how could they expect them to maintain order on the streets? The American government wasn't meant to serve the common people. After hearing Pepper's story, producer man Happy shuddered and immediately gathered his tools to begin renovating the villa. His mission was simply to protect Pepper Potts. What did the lives of those outside have to do with him? As long as he persevered, Happy was confident that Mr. Stark would return to rescue them. As for why Mr. Stark dared to leave his girlfriend in the care of his bodyguard, Happy, it was because Happy was the producer man who had the final say on whether Tony Stark could have a girlfriend, and whether she was beautiful. The producer. Who would get to know Tony Stark's girlfriend first? The producer. Who would care for his wife and daughter after Tony Stark's death? The producer. Therefore, Tony Stark would never doubt Happy's character. While they were busy renovating their beachfront villa, chaos erupted on the streets of Hawaii. Everyone who got the news responded and rushed to the supermarkets and storage warehouses. The supermarkets had been looted repeatedly, and the storage warehouses were surrounded by Marines who had arrived on the scene. These were their belongings. Chapter 361 American Purgatory. The Hawaiian Islands house a U.S. military base in the heart of the Pacific Ocean, serving as the headquarters of the Pacific Fleet. Due to its geographical location, this base was particularly vulnerable to the influence of the Southwest Confederation. Although the fleet commander attempted to negotiate a sale, the Confederation strangled his lifeline with logistical supplies. Currently, along the Pacific coast of the United States, Washington and Oregon in the north were controlled by Native Americans, while California in the south was the Confederation's headquarters. Besides supplying the Pacific Fleet and Hawaii from these states, could the Pacific Fleet still count on the Eastern Confederation to send supplies from afar? The Pacific Fleet had no choice. Even with officers controlled by Jewish syndicates from the Northeast, they could not defy the tide of events. However, these events were all a bygone era. Once the Hawaiian Islands were blockaded, the American soldiers on the islands were left to fend for themselves. After confirming the signals at sea and in the air using speedboats and drones, the Pacific Fleet immediately dispatched Marines to take over the island's storage warehouses without even notifying the Hawaiian authorities. The military is a violent institution. When order remains, it obeys civilian rules, as promotions and benefits are entirely controlled by the pen and ink bureaucracy. But once order collapses, the military reveals its true colors. Now that the area has been confirmed to be under lockdown, the natural first thought would be to scramble for food and water. Once the first wave of riots is over, the National Guard will probably be deployed. "We won't be involved, just hold the warehouse," the leading Marine captain instructed his men. As a federal agency, no federal government would allow them to interfere in local administration, and they simply don't bother with such tedious matters. As Americans, with extensive experience responding to riots, they understand that it's virtually impossible for every city's police and National Guard to arrive immediately. Not long ago, an Oakland convenience store was looted by hundreds of people. Even after the owner called the police, local police arrived 9 hours later. They faced no accountability. No one in the local police department considered the incident a crime for which they were held responsible. Americans are experienced, knowing that riots come in waves, with the military and police only arriving to clean up after the initial wave subsides. Today's incident in Hawaii was quite significant, and public anger needed to be vented, so it might take a while. Local police and the National Guard also needed time to collect supplies for their families. Once they were done, they could change into their work uniforms and then be deployed. The routes would be the same, and the deployment would be even faster. The riots raged from morning to afternoon, until there was nothing left to loot on the streets, and the exhausted people returned to their homes. But then another unfortunate incident occurred. "Fuck. I paid for a month's room, why aren't you letting us stay? How dare you kick my wife and kids out? Do you want to die?" Bang, bang, bang. A series of gunshots rang out. An angry guest attempted to use violence against the hotel's security, but the well-prepared security guards unexpectedly pulled out real guns. "You saw it all. He attacked me first. I was acting in self-defense." With that, the security guard casually stepped forward and kicked aside several cans near the body, completely ignoring the woman whose face was splattered with her husband's blood and the terrified child. "If I were you, I'd find a safe place right now." The murderous security guard leaned into the ear of the rather attractive widow and chuckled, "I'm kind-hearted. I can offer you a place to stay." The woman's scream pierced the security guard's ears, catching him off guard. "Bitch!" The security guard, furious, covered his ears with one hand and slapped the woman's face with the other, knocking out 2 bloody back teeth. "Do you really think I care about you? The last thing the island needs right now is beautiful women." Realizing the Hawaiian Islands were under blockade, any influential figure on the islands immediately mobilized their forces to protect their properties while scavenging as much supplies as possible. Food and water were essential, as were electricity and fuel. This was why the hotels immediately reneged on their contracts and evicted their guests. Even if food isn't provided, guests still consume water and electricity. If the ban is short-lived, at most a few general managers can be ousted to explain themselves. But if it lasts longer, will explanations even be necessary? Even hotels are acting this way, and local Hawaiians are also beginning to evict former free guests. No matter how much they plead, or even directly try to gain leverage, they can't resist the hard-heartedness of these landlords. Of course, there are some instances of all hell breaks loose due to mismanagement. Despite the turmoil in Hawaii at this time, most people haven't yet felt desperate. Many quick-witted individuals have even grabbed enough food and water to last them 10 days or even half a month. No one has noticed the air is quietly becoming turbid. Even if they had, they wouldn't have paid much attention. After all, smoke is rising from the city, and everyone would have assumed it was air pollution caused by the fire, which would soon disappear. This is an archipelago in the heart of the ocean. Who could have imagined that an island could be so airtight? No one has noticed that the wind in Hawaii has died down. For days afterward, the turmoil continued. The struggle for food and water, essential to survival, was a constant spectacle of human tragedy across the Hawaiian Islands. Hell wasn't empty, nor had the devil descended upon the earth. Instead, America itself had become a mortal coil. To survive, most people unleashed the beasts they had long held within them. "Please, give me some food," a ragged, blonde woman, clutching a swaddled baby, knocked on every door. Behind every building and every door lay armed homeowners, vigilant and ready. "Get out. Or I'll kill you, please, my child can't hold on any longer." After knocking on dozens of doors, an elderly woman finally found a way through the crack in the doorway, holding a small piece of rotten bread dangling from the barrel of her gun. "Take it and leave." Though kind-hearted, the woman remained vigilant, her finger on the trigger, poised to pull the trigger if the woman outside made any movement. With lightning speed, the blunt woman snatched the small piece of bread dangling from the barrel of the gun. Just as she was about to stuff it into her mouth, she snapped back, bowing profusely in thanks. Thank you for your kindness. Baby, we have food." With these words, the blunt woman darted to the stairwell with small, quick steps, eagerly stuffing the small piece of bread into her mouth, leaving no trace. Looking down, the swaddled baby's eyes were tightly closed, his face pale, mottled with marks, and even emitting a foul odor. "Damn it, it's already stinking." The blunt woman was unwilling to give up. She had finally found a convenient way to beg for food. After all, even the most heartless person would always feel compassion for a hungry baby. It was an animal's natural instinct to protect their offspring and maintain the survival of the species. No, 2 more days, the blunt woman came up with a solution. Go to the mall and find some face cream to put on, and then spray on some perfume. All the edible things in the mall have been searched countless times by countless people, but inedible cosmetics are everywhere. As for when the baby died, I leave it to everyone's imagination. Anyway, I can't describe it. Chapter 362, America can become a battlefield in the multiverse. All the consortium bosses hiding abroad quickly discovered they had lost contact with mainland America. Phone calls and video calls were unavailable. A check of their internet connections revealed unusual obstruction on the transoceanic fiber optic cable. Consequently, the major consortium scrambled to coordinate. "Can you contact mainland America?" "What? You've lost contact too? What's going on?" Even if some surrendered privately, it's impossible for everyone to do so. Had they truly become so isolated and abandoned, they wouldn't have survived. Something's happened. Something's happened back home. We've got news. The airlines are reporting that several flights have experienced accidents and have suddenly lost contact while landing in mainland America. Our shipping company has also lost contact with a ship, and the last communication coordinates show it just entered mainland waters. After all, these global consortiums, controlling numerous social resources, quickly gathered information from various sources and deduced a startling possibility. The mainland America had been blocked for unknown reasons. It's not just mainland China. Southwest arms dealers are reporting that Alaska and Hawaii have also lost contact. Pacific Fleet Headquarters has lost contact, and patrol vessels are urgently returning. As more and more information gathered, a shocking piece of news quietly spread. The American mainland, including 2 overseas states, had been blockaded by an unknown force. Send planes and ships to investigate the scene as quickly as possible. Come and see. The eastern countries are interrupting with another urgent news broadcast. While the consortium bosses were still considering sending personnel to investigate, a SHIA spacecraft appeared high above America, broadcasting footage around the world. Dear viewers, here's an urgent news interruption. I know what I'm about to say sounds absurd, but it's true. The footage is provided by an SHIA spacecraft high above America. We can see our SHIA comrades floating at 15,000 meters, yet they're actually grounded. As the host explained, the SHIA agents, in the footage, leaped from the spacecraft without any equipment to demonstrate the reality of the situation, landing steadily on a layer of transparent film. The film of light enveloping the American continent was a spherical mass with irregular edges. It curved along the American border, But at high altitudes and deep within the Earth's mantle, it remained a curved spherical shape, albeit with a significantly larger surface area. The film's surface was so smooth that the SWA agent slipped and fell upon landing. Before the audience could laugh at him, they saw another agent pour a bucket of black ink onto the film. As the black ink spread slowly across the sky at an altitude of 15,000 meters, the wide-angle lens revealed the contours of the mountains and rivers below. The audience was stunned, their minds blank. That was until the host delivered his shocking conclusion. Yes, as you can see, the American mainland has been enveloped by an unknown membrane. This membrane is so vast that it covers the entire American territory, including the mainland and 2 overseas states. The world was silent for several seconds, then erupted in excitement. Oh my God, my life has been so worth it. Not only have we seen humanity break out of the solar system and colonize other planets, we've also seen alien invasions. And now we see America surrounded by a physical wall. How wonderful. Are you kidding? Impossible, absolutely impossible. This must be a conspiracy by a despotic government. How could America be blockaded? How could humans have such technology? It's the beacon of human civilization, Dad, my dear Dad. How could you possibly die? Hold on, you must hold on. Even if you leave, at least leave me a legacy. While the audience was more delighted than saddened, leaders from various countries, while shocked, felt a tinge of fear. If America could be blockaded, what about them? Consequently, nations, both members of the Earth Civilization Alliance and not, expressed their concerns to the new leader. I wonder if the SHIELD Bureau has a solution to this barrier. SHIELD, please, break it. While the world's largest conglomerates maintain their own bases, they've long since expanded their influence worldwide through multiple investments. Their entangled power base wields considerable influence over international politics. Simply put, their supporters can be found among the highest echelons of every nation. Some are blatant, proud of it rather than ashamed, others remain deeply hidden, never revealing themselves until the most crucial moment. The current situation is tantamount to undermining the very foundations of America's 10 largest conglomerates. How could they possibly hold back? Every pawn still standing was mobilized, either pleading or demanding, conveying their intentions to the SHIELD Bureau. Zheng Xian couldn't avoid it, but Lin Hao didn't care. Spacecraft still hovering high above America launched various attacks on the barrier, even launching a high-yield nuclear bomb. However, there was no reaction at all. Transport planes from various countries that arrived later detected residual nuclear radiation, proving that the SHIELD Bureau wasn't just posturing. Undeterred, the Jewish consortium used their little Israel to launch several undisclosed nuclear bombs in quick succession. These, despite slightly increasing radiation levels high above America, proved ineffective. Even the arms dealers of the Southwest Federation, similarly evacuated abroad, were stunned. Their homes had been robbed. After numerous tests by various nations, we have been forced to accept the fact that the barrier enclosing America is incredibly strong, impenetrable even to humanity's most powerful weapons. This conclusion left the sheepdogs devastated. The onlookers, displeased with America's past behavior, wanted to laugh insincerely, but fearing the accusations of inhumanity, they suppressed their laughter with a few more sips of wine and a few more bites of meat. Shen Ran, hiding in Alaska and gathering his men, breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing this. Whether or not the SHIEAS had the means to breach this barrier, they were unwilling to use it so soon. Shen Ran certainly hoped the SHIE agency wouldn't resort to such tactics, but after half a century as a secret agent, he'd long since learned to be cautious. Having changed his identity, he'd used his supernatural powers to recruit henchmen in Alaska, controlling food and water supplies, and had already assembled a considerable force that was growing rapidly. Such groups were bound to emerge in today's climate, so even if you were exposed to surveillance satellites, it wouldn't arouse suspicion from other countries. Unaware that his newly changed identity had been discovered and marked by Lin Hao again, just days after his change, Shen Ran hoped to reap the benefits, while Lin Hao was happy to see America become a battlefield. Shen Ran's creation of an iron wall sparked a new idea in Lin Hao. Perhaps the sealed-off American continent could become a multiverse battlefield. The previous plot about the lack of oxygen in Hawaii was changed to one of turbid air, where toxic gases couldn't be excreted, resulting in excessive levels of harmful gases. P.S. It's not that I neglected the foreign affairs personnel in the United States, I simply couldn't write about them. Please forgive me. Chapter 363, Actions of the Centrists and Popularists. The spectacular sight of a high-altitude nuclear explosion, even though the sound couldn't be heard, still caught the attention of Americans within the blockade. Tony Stark and Carol Danvers, who could fly, even soared into the sky alongside the nuclear bomb. This time, it wasn't a missile before it exploded, but a mushroom cloud that actually exploded. You know what? Watching a nuclear bomb explode up close is quite beautiful, Tony from 2023 said, finding a way to be happy. People outside will give up hope immediately when they see that a nuclear bomb can't explode. Tony from this universe gave him a sidelong glance. Haven't you noticed, Carol, floating beside the two of them and glowing, said in a deep voice, sunlight can come in, but nuclear radiation can't. Sunlight is a type of electromagnetic radiation, while nuclear radiation is the particle stream released after the fission or decay of radioactive material. There's a difference between the two, the two scientists said almost in unison. Carol's already sullen face darkened even further. She glared at the two of them. I have as much knowledge in my head as you do, then why are you asking? Tony from this universe didn't know much about Carol, nor did he have a clear impression of her combat prowess, unlike Tony from the main universe, who praised him. You mean if we could create electromagnetic radiation similar to sunlight, we could penetrate this membrane? Tony from 2023 gave Carol a compliment. Haha, Tony from this universe sneered. What? You're planning on turning into light? I don't have a clue about turning into light yet, but if I shrink down to particle state and enter the microscopic universe, Tony from 2023 had an idea. He might not be able to penetrate this membrane, but he could return to the main universe through the quantum realm. The time-space shuttle can break down the barriers between universes, allowing access to the microscopic quantum realm from any point in space. The membrane currently covering America theoretically presents no limit to his device. Unfortunately, Tony didn't realize the true reason for the time-space shuttle's failure was the lockdown of the entire base universe. The centrists remained in New York, specifically at Stark Tower. Carol's spaceship floated overhead, providing ready support. Steve, from 2023, led the still injured Phil Coulson and his team, scrambling to maintain order in New York City with the assistance of NYPD Commissioner George Stacy. Elsewhere, they were powerless. Tony, having devised a solution, shared his idea and his theory of a time machine upon returning to Earth. Most of the raw materials needed to make these things are readily available in Stark Industries warehouses. The most crucial ingredient, the PIM particles, only has two remaining shuttles. Tony, in this universe, didn't bother emphasizing ownership of the raw materials. He desperately wanted to escape his predicament and reconnect with his girlfriend in Hawaii. It was already the third day since the blockade began, and the SWIE and the Jewish-Israeli alliance had deployed multiple nuclear weapons. Such a commotion couldn't help but alert Pepper Potts in Hawaii. Upon learning of the blockade of the American mainland, she couldn't help but send Iron Man to investigate. But Tony from this universe had been having Jarvis monitor the skies over New York for the past 2 days. But he couldn't find any trace of the armor. This meant not only the mainland, but even Hawaii was blocked. So Tony had to do whatever it took to break through this barrier. PIM particles, Tony from this universe immediately demanded. Dr. Hank Pym's invention, yes, Tony from 2023 nodded. Where can I find these particles? Tony from this universe eagerly asked. But his other self shook his head helplessly and sighed. I had Friday check the airline's travel records. Hank Pym, who was originally in San Francisco, flew to Hawaii with his daughter 3 months ago. Now, I've also checked his home in Hank Industries, but haven't found any additional PIM particles. Shit, Tony from this universe was so angry he smashed a cup. The Marvel Universe has a very interesting rule, copyright. All scientists who appear in the comics have exclusive copyrights for their iconic inventions. Even in life-threatening situations, superheroes cannot infringe or copy them without permission. Anyone who copies another's invention without authorization is essentially a villain. This makes sense. Superheroes can violate public order, and anti-heroes can even clean up their act, but they can't violate the rules set by capitalists to protect their rights. Otherwise, Marvel wouldn't have the confidence to crack down on comic book piracy. The most bizarre plot twist stemming from this unwritten rule is that even figures as intelligent as Tony Stark or Reed Richards can't copy someone else's invention without a patent. To justify this, Marvel editors publicly state that these highly proprietary inventions present high technical barriers, making them difficult to replicate without access to the original data. This forced Tony Stark to build his time machine using the stockpile of Pym particles left behind by Hank Pym before Thanos wiped them out, rather than creating his own. Otherwise, the time travel to 1970 wouldn't have happened in Avengers 4. It's unimaginable that, for a major operation involving half the universe's life, they wouldn't have needed a little extra energy source. This also leaves Tony helpless in the present. "Don't we still have 2 chances to travel back in time?" Carol immediately reminded them. "We could first travel to Hawaii and find Hank Pym, asking him for more Pym particles, or bring him back and manufacture new ones." "That's what I thought," Tony from 2023 nodded. "The final problem now is to find the cause of the shuttle's malfunction. Without that, everything else is wishful thinking." Carol shook her head, indicating her helplessness. "It's a pity that the cosmic cube in your universe has already been taken by SWORD, otherwise, we could test the power of this space stone," Tony from 2023 said with a hint of regret, but he hadn't forgotten his true mission. "Forget it, it's bound to fall into the hands of SHIE. Carol's face was bitter. She had seen the public video Lin Hao sent to Thanos on the Starlink and the 5 differently colored stones. They had no chance of obtaining the Infinity Stones in this universe, but fortunately, Thanos' slaughter of half of all life would never happen again in this universe. But why was only America suffering? Carol still couldn't wrap her head around it. She doubted Lin Hao, despite his immense power, but she couldn't understand why he was wasting his time messing with America. With his power, he could easily dominate the world and act tyrannically. If he truly had a problem with America, wouldn't he just attack? Was there any need for such a fuss? While the centrists were trying to escape their captivity, Captain Zhen, the popularist leader, and his team hijacked a transport plane and quickly returned to Texas. Having severed contact with his Hell base, Captain Zhen lost the core members he'd cultivated over the past 2 or 3 years and was forced to return to the roots of everything, the red zone with the strongest popular base, the Texas redneck community. After the bombing of Houston and the subsequent Texas uprising, which was brutally suppressed by federal authorities, only a small number of people were taken to Captain Zhen's Hell base. The majority hid under different names across Texas. These individuals were the main force Captain Zhen used for the Second Great Texas Uprising. For 2 or 3 years, Captain True maintained contact with these people. Residents already absorbed into the Hell base would occasionally return to their homeland, secretly reuniting with former friends and family, inevitably leading to interactions. Captain True made no secret of the Hell base's existence from potential comrades. Even if intelligence were leaked, the federal authorities wouldn't be able to locate the base in Hell. Could the FBI, who only warned people, actually go into Hell to arrest people? "Johnny, let's split up and contact the people," Captain True said solemnly. "With riots raging and supplies scarce, we must quickly organize a team to restore order." "Okay," Johnny Blazer, taking his orders, single-handedly rode his flaming mount across the Texas wilderness, heading for one criminal settlement after another. These survivors of the first Texas uprising had been branded guilty thugs by the authorities and, naturally, forced to hide in the wilderness in remote towns. Now, with America under blockade, the people in turmoil, and the government weakened, it was an opportune time to rekindle the torch and raise the Lone Star flag. They couldn't help but organize, because with their production disrupted, they couldn't even get food. There's also the Hawaiian plot, where man-made disasters are always a byproduct of natural disasters, but it takes time to develop. These 2 chapters are meant to describe the reactions of other areas. Otherwise, the Hawaiian timeline would be stretched out, and the other parts would feel disconnected. This chapter has already laid the groundwork for connecting them. Chapter 364, The Second Texas Rebellion. A chaotic situation offers numerous advantages to those attempting an uprising, such as easier mobilization of the population and infiltration of target cities. Large-scale mobilizations of personnel would also avoid attracting the attention of the authorities, as their energy was already sapped by the relentless unrest. At Captain Zhen's command, the scattered rioters of Texas converged on Houston in the south. Houston is the 4th largest city in the United States, with a population of over 2 million. Despite a decline in population following the previous unrest, it remains the most populous city in Texas. Furthermore, it boasts a concentration of renowned manufacturing plants and a strong presence in both heavy and light industries. If an uprising were to take place in Texas, Houston would be a must-capture location. A developed country like the United States is destined to rely solely on urban centers, as its population and industrial base are concentrated in cities. Hiding in remote rural areas would result in a cult-like existence at best, with no chance of establishing a political power. Over several days, the scattered rioters of Texas gradually arrived in Houston, taking advantage of the ongoing unrest within the city to successfully infiltrate the city's interior. Captain, all teams have arrived at their designated locations, Matt Murdock reported to the real captain. Without his conspicuous uniform, Mao was just an ordinary blind man, easily overlooked by passers-by. However, his agility and built-in radar allowed him to easily detect you if authorities were following him, making him the perfect liaison. At the outset of an uprising, leaks are crucial. Once the enemy is prepared, the insurgents face a sudden increase in difficulty, potentially even forfeiting their plans. The current chaos in America has greatly aided the insurgents, and Matt, as an excellent liaison, has ensured smooth communication between the teams in each region and the front command, maximizing their combat effectiveness. The uprising is scheduled for 3 a.m. Each squad must seize the designated areas as quickly as possible: the power plant, the water plant, the munitions company. The swordsman squadron will undertake the assault. We must immediately break through the enemy's defenses, allowing the comrades behind us to charge in. As a veteran of the battlefield, Steve Rogers possesses extensive experience in commanding battles. For today's battle, they had carefully planned and prepared thoroughly, without any strategic planning to speak of. The true difficulty lies in the combat conditions in each area. The rioters are, after all, not regular troops and have received no formal military training. While the rednecks are fierce, they can only fight when the tide is favorable. Therefore, the extraordinary must lead the charge, breaking through the defenses. The frequent chaos also has a downside. Soldiers are gathered at all the necessary targets, already on guard against a rioter's attack. It's a given that every gain has its drawbacks. Fortunately, this is a world of extraordinary powers. Otherwise, relying solely on a mob of people, the real captain would have no chance of success. I will personally lead the attack on the National Guard base. Captain True chose the most challenging mission, his strongest skills making this one the obvious choice. After the missions were distributed, insurgents in various areas of Houston tied red towels around their arms and counted their various weapons and ammunition. Night fell quietly, and as residents who had been demonstrating all day dispersed and returned home, the insurgents gradually took up their respective battle positions. Fortunately, Captain True had a large number of swordsmen under his command. In previous battles in New York, he had always personally led the charge, with few casualties. This ensured that each insurgent group was assigned 1 or 2 swordsmen. Captain True, Johnny Blaze, and Matt Murdock each led a team to attack the most challenging positions. As the night deepened, the leaders of each team stared intently at the clock. When the hands struck 3 in the morning, the swordsmen responsible for the attack silently emerged from their hiding places and penetrated the enemy lines like ghosts. Sword flashes flashed in the thick darkness, and the swordsmen swiftly eliminated the sentries along the defensive line. Once their swords cleaved the barricades, the insurgents surged forward, swarming in. Morale was paramount in a mob-like battle, so they couldn't stop or retreat in the face of setbacks, otherwise organizing a second charge would be nearly impossible. Consequently, the leaders of each unit, unable to reorganize their formations, charged fearlessly, maintaining the valor of their men. Fortunately, the enemy was unsettled and morale shattered by the unknown blockade of the American mainland. The soldiers had been busy stockpiling supplies for their families and suppressing the unrest in the city, leaving them exhausted. 3 o'clock in the morning was the most demanding time. Combined with the swordsman's powerful offensive power and various beneficial status effects, the insurgents' attack flowed smoothly. Simultaneously with the attacks from various locations, Captain Zhen also charged the National Guard camp, his attack speed even faster. Magical wings assisted him in soaring over the towering walls, and with a swift swing of his sword, he easily dispatched his enemies. At this point, Captain Zhen's heart was completely ruthless, uncaring of his fellow citizens. He struck with ruthless force, showing no mercy. America must immediately restore order and organize people to resume production in order to protect the civilian population, which was the largest number. Could the elite eagles possibly do this? Their first instincts would surely be to seize the already limited resources and then watch the civilians fight and die. The more people died, the less of a threat they posed, and the greater their chances of survival. If Captain Zhen wanted to protect more civilians, he had no choice but to overthrow the existing order and establish a new, advanced regime capable of mobilizing the masses to resume production. Some might wonder why the elite eagles, represented by the capitalists, couldn't organize people to resume production. Capitalism's lure to labor is remuneration, meaning they must first incur a certain cost, then recoup that cost through profit and pocket the difference. But to reap that profit, they must trade goods. In these times, with a people in turmoil, who would still be willing to spend money? How many people will have money to buy things after losing their jobs? When the capitalist order collapses, capitalists will first go into hiding, using force to protect their holdings. They wait until the civilians have reached their limit and the unrest has subsided before re-emerging to build factories and resume production. Civilians are not fools. When unrest breaks out, some will inevitably challenge the once powerful capitalists. This system makes it difficult for the government to restore effective production in dangerous times, as history has repeatedly proven. The price is the deaths of countless civilians. Captain Zhen, unwilling to see civilians die in vain, must overturn the existing structure and establish a new one, a new system in which leaders led by example, work alongside the people, and fully mobilize their initiative. As long as they remain true to their original aspirations, this system is inherently resilient. Captain Zhen quickly penetrated a National Guard compound, but he chose not to linger. After destroying the heavy weapons within, he quickly moved on to his next objective. Supernatural forces infused the Second Great Texas Uprising with powerful energy. As night faded and dawn broke, Houston welcomed a new scene. I was forced to drink half a pound of white wine at a pre-holiday party today. I will try to write another chapter. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 365, The Only Light in the Dark American Land. One country, four regimes. When Steve Rogers, the true Captain America of this universe, raised the banner of rebellion in Texas and officially re-established a Lone Star Republic, four independent regimes emerged on American soil. There was the Eastern Confederacy, which only covered a few states east of the Appalachian Mountains but claimed to be the legitimate United States, the Indian Republic, entrenched in Washington and Oregon in the Northwest, the Southwestern Confederacy, based in California, Arizona, and New Mexico in the Southwest and having already invaded Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas, and the Lone Star Republic, which had recently taken control of Houston and was facing a counterattack from remnants of Texas. As for the other states, all had previously remained on the sidelines. Some, like Florida, had joined forces with Georgia and Alabama to form the Florida Confederacy, demonstrating a strong sense of independence, yet they hadn't ultimately abandoned the banner of the United States and re-established a new one. Some states merely established local mutual protection organizations, treating the two main forces of the Eastern and Western Civil War with indifference, wavering and vacillating, a pattern of not seeing the rabbit, not releasing the hawk. Unfortunately, with the blockade of America, this situation was shattered. The foundation of any organization is people. When people are unsettled and unrest rages, the existing social order is bound to be shattered. The Lone Star Republic, taking advantage of this situation, provided a successful example for many ambitious individuals within America, further exacerbating the chaos. However, lacking extraordinary combat power and ideological support, these ambitious individuals could only resort to traditional American methods such as gangs and cults. These methods only exacerbated the situation and provided no benefit to the common people, highlighting the invaluable value of the Lone Star Republic. After capturing Houston, Captain Zhen organized his men to build a defensive perimeter around the city, awaiting a counterattack from the rest of Texas. However, he was surprised to find that the counterattack was far from sufficient, not only outnumbered but also slow in action. America was blockaded, and the conglomerate bosses who had fled the country were unable to contact those who remained behind. Those who remained lacked the authority and prestige to consolidate the various factions and form an effective leadership structure. Before their retreat, the bosses had established a system of checks and balances among those who remained, ensuring that no single power existed. Strategic matters required the approval of the bosses, otherwise, how could they have dared to move forward? Furthermore, After the blockade became public, even the executive officers themselves began to harbor ulterior motives, further reducing the efficiency of the government's response. They were unable to exert even 30% of their full strength. Captain Zhen personally took action, swiftly repelling a few homecoming groups and completely securing Houston's foundation. With the situation stabilized, Steve Rogers began implementing drastic reforms in the Houston area. First, he forcibly seized control of all factories and farms within and outside the city, eliminating the rentier class and mobilizing the public to resume production. Second, he selected young men of clean backgrounds for military training to form a new army. Finally, he selected intellectuals from the lower classes to form a new administrative body. This three-pronged approach not only restored normal production and life in Houston, but also demonstrated unparalleled vitality. Recognizing the reality of the American lockdown, everyone realized that food, water, energy, and other necessities would be the most valuable in the future. In countries controlled by capitalism, most production is driven solely by the pursuit of profit. Over half of the wealth created by workers is appropriated by capitalists for their own consumption and self-sufficiency, with only a portion being reinvested in social reproduction to further pursue profits. This model has a fatal flaw in today's blockaded America, as workers facing a life-or-death crisis no longer willingly accept capitalist exploitation. In the past, when order was stable, workers had no choice but to accept exploitation to survive. Now, in an environment where death is a constant threat, why should they continue to watch the fruits of their labor largely siphon away? Why should they willingly watch as capitalists, who work without labor, continue to enjoy the luxuries afforded by exploitation? Capitalists also don't trust the poor to work honestly and continue to create wealth for them. Instead, they hoard vast quantities of supplies and munitions, hiding in their mansions, built like fortresses. Without the leadership of the past, there was no hope of restoring normal production. Riots broke out across the rest of America, disrupting production and further exacerbating the shortage of daily necessities. Powerful organizations intensified their looting, making life increasingly difficult for civilians. At this moment, the Lone Star Republic became the sole shining star in the darkness of America, the most dazzling figure on this land. My fellow Americans, I am Steve Rogers, once known as Captain America. After putting the ideas he had learned over the past 3 years into practice in Houston, the real captain saw a completely transformed city, a completely different world. This strengthened his resolve to transform America. This confidence convinced him that he was on the right path and that he could bring a new world to his fellow Americans. Now that he had achieved success, he naturally wanted to share the fruits of his success with more Americans. So, he immediately used the remaining television networks in the country to deliver a live speech. I'm sure everyone knows what's happened in America. Yes, America is sealed off by a mysterious membrane. We can't escape, but we can't despair. We must rely on our own strength to save ourselves. I'm in Houston now. I just led an uprising to overthrow the Texas authorities. Now, production and life in Houston have been restored. The scene shifts to the streets of Houston, where people are bustling. However, unlike in other cities, there are no demonstrations or violent acts. Instead, they are engaged in various labor activities under the leadership of new government officials. They are cleaning up the city's garbage and repairing previously damaged streets and buildings. There's no anger, anxiety, or panic on the faces of the people. Instead, they are filled with hope and an upbeat spirit. My fellow Americans, if you've lost your food and water, if survival is difficult, please find a way to come to Houston. We've prepared job opportunities for you here, and we've prepared enough food and water. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Fake. It's all fake. These people on the street aren't real people. Seeing the thriving Houston after the flag change, while their own city was plagued by seemingly endless unrest, America's elite eagles were unsurprisingly furious. What a joke. How could the greatness of capitalism, the greatness of America, be no match for the red they had already wiped out? I owe 3 chapters, so I'll make up for it with 4 chapters a day during the 3-day holiday. Chapter 366 Steve from the main universe, isn't America the greatest country? New York, Stark Tower. Watching the live broadcast of Houston's urban landscape, the centrists fell into hushed silence. Carol Danvers refused to believe that in just a few days, the real captain had not only taken over Houston and established a new government, but also restored production and life, even completely revitalizing the entire city's spirit. It was nothing short of a miracle. Considering they combined the superheroes and technological expertise of two different universes, they could only barely maintain a basic level of order in New York. Maintain meant immediately dispatching troops to disperse any riots. They had considered restoring production and allowing residents to return to work, but their attempts had failed. Either the workers were cunning, preferring to take food and raw materials home rather than work honestly, or the capitalists took advantage of the situation by cutting wages and raising prices, causing the newly reopened factories to be instantly sold out. This led the centrists to develop a belief that the working class was cunning and devious, and they even began to lose their sympathy for the common people. But there's no harm without comparison. Seeing how the populist Captain Real had quickly transformed Houston, a city smaller than New York, into a vibrant and orderly city, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of doubt. Could it be that the greatness of capitalism couldn't possibly rival that red? I don't believe it. I want to see for myself. Carol immediately burst into a burst of colorful light, dashing towards the window and flying south. Her speed was so fast that the round trip took only a few minutes. When she returned, everyone's eyes were fixed on her, only to be met with a look of dejected defeat. It's actually true, Steve Rogers from the main universe exclaimed in disbelief. How could this be? Isn't America the greatest nation on Earth? This had been his pride for decades. Especially since waking up, witnessing America's dominance on Earth for half a century, it gave Steve a strong sense of pride, further solidifying his patriotism and his belief in the American spirit. But now, sealed by a thin membrane, the America of this universe has revealed its true form. The American spirit that once made him so proud has become worthless, even emitting a foul stench. Why can they get citizens to work so willingly and even happily? Tony Stark of both universes remained expressionless, unable to answer, and dared not. As a major capitalist, how could he not know how to motivate workers? Moreover, he was born in the 1970s and experienced the last days of happiness for the American middle class. Back then, to fight the Red Bear, capitalists were forced to provide workers with better treatment. Relying on the hegemonic system of the dollar, which was first linked to gold and then to oil, they exploited the world and forged a happy American middle class, becoming the American dream that captivated the world. Tony Stark of every universe knows the truth, but he cannot speak it out, cannot say it. This is not just a problem for him or one company, it reflects the attitude of the entire American capitalist class. He can do charity, even give away his wealth, but he must never challenge the basic rules of the capitalist world. Let's continue searching for the cause of the time machine's malfunction. Tony from this universe changed the subject. My girlfriend and Dr. Hank Pym are trapped in Hawaii. If we delay any longer, everyone's doomed. Coincidentally, the previously unresponsive time machine suddenly began to function. Seeing the device on his wrist begin to function again, Tony from the main universe felt a sense of absurdity and unreality. I have a feeling there's a hand controlling all this. We suddenly arrived in this universe, the device suddenly failed, and now it's suddenly working again. No time for that. Tony from this universe snatched the time machine from his hand and began operating it. It was Tony Stark again. After Tony from the main universe explained the theory and manufacturing process to Tony from this universe naturally learned the basics. The quantum realm in the Marvel Universe is a microcosm independent of the multiverse, serving as a hub connecting the multiverse. Tony Stark's time machine uses Pym particles to shrink objects to a quantum state, allowing them to enter the quantum realm and travel to other universes. While it appears to be time travel, it's actually space travel, using time as one of the coordinate axes. Therefore, this device can enter the quantum realm from any point in the blocked American mainland and then reach the similarly blocked Hawaiian Islands in this universe. The membrane Shenran created through his wish only blocks the American mainland at the macroscopic level. It can't block all points in space, let alone the microscopic universe. The only thing that can restrict travel is the authority held by Lin Hao. Without authorization, the base universe cannot communicate with the quantum realm. Clearly, Director Lin has given authorization. Just as Tony in this universe is about to activate the device to travel, Carol swoops in and snatches it away. What do you mean? Tony in this universe's color changes, glaring at Carol. You can't go. Let the other you go. Carol returns the device to Tony in the main universe. Because I still don't trust you. Just as Tony from this universe was about to lose his temper, Tony from the main universe quickly reassured him, don't worry, I'll get Pepper and Happy out safely. He pressed the start button. Tony from this universe had already set the coordinates, and as soon as he started, he vanished. In the blink of an eye, Tony from the main universe appeared in Honolulu. Sir, the air quality here is very poor. Toxic gases are exceeding the standard. The AI Friday immediately sent a warning. I've switched your internal circulation system. Tony hurried, immediately piloting his suit into the sky. Contact Jarvis and find out about the villa. He didn't go to the beachfront villa first because Tony from this universe had told him that there were a large amount of supplies and 10 suits left there. He figured a few days wouldn't be a big problem. Hank Pym was the key. If something happened to him, he wouldn't even be able to get Pepper and Happy out, because he only had one Pym particle left, enough for a single trip, which he had taken from Steve. They can't even return to the main universe. Proud Tony is unwilling to return in failure. The main universe can no longer find Pym particles, but there is still hope in this universe. There are 2 more chapters today. Chapter 367, Hawaiian Soldier. After several days of blockade, the streets of Hawaii fell into an eerie calm. Residents, previously venting their fear frantically, were consumed by hunger. They were now focused on finding as much food as possible, leaving them with no energy for protests, looting, and burning. The ships and yachts in the harbor were now controlled by the wealthy and powerful. They seized processing equipment and raw materials, fashioned nets, and fished offshore around the clock. Aware of the deteriorating air quality within the blockaded area, and understanding the importance of oxygen, the Hawaii Provisional Council strictly prohibited the harvesting of marine algae. Joint law enforcement teams were deployed daily at the harbor, confiscating any fish and fishing gear caught breaking the rules. Doesn't this suggest that order has been restored in Hawaii? But consider, are the people who own ships and yachts ordinary people? Would these elite elites share the precious food with the masses? If it weren't for the need for hard labor, they wouldn't even share food with their minions. If only 30,000 people shared enough supplies to feed 3 million people in Hawaii for a month, the food would last for 100 years if it didn't spoil. What if only 3,000 people shared it? As long as the needs of the Pacific Fleet, a powerful and armed group, were met, wouldn't the surplus be enough to sustain a portion of the upper class? After deducting the daily expenses of the Pacific Fleet, the remaining supplies would barely be enough for the upper class to barely survive. Those with less wealth and prestige wouldn't even qualify for rations. Hawaii's top brass had reached a consensus: ignore the vast civilian population and leave them to fend for themselves. Most of the food and water in the archipelago was controlled by the Pacific Fleet, a small portion was in the hands of the wealthy and powerful, and a tiny amount was snatched up by civilians who saw an opportunity that day, only to be snatched back and forth over the next few days, changing hands several times. No one cared how many people died on the islands. In fact, most people believed that more deaths were better. More deaths would reduce the consumption of food and water, allowing the survivors to survive longer. The most relaxed group in Hawaii these days is undoubtedly the Pacific Fleet's officers and men, especially the enlisted men, who have even achieved a temporary class jump. Fearing a mutiny, the Pacific Fleet's brass are forced to provide massive amounts of food and water daily to keep the enlisted men alive. While they'd love to reduce the number of enlisted men who consume these precious supplies, they dare not act. The enlisted men understand that their weapons are their lifeblood, enabling them to fight any enemy. Fearing the enlisted men's grief and the possibility of a rebellion, the Pacific Fleet's brass are forced to grit their teeth and maintain the massive expenditures. This has led to the enlisted men, who receive 3 daily rations of food and water, becoming the most prestigious group in the blockade. A piece of bread and a sip of milk can make celebrities, once seen only on screen, kneel down and serve them with attentive care, treating them like royalty. Hey, cook, I fucked 2 more female celebrities today. They're so hot. A shambling enlisted man walked up to the side of the ship and boasted to his colleagues. Hold on, kid. Food and water are only going to get less and less. Storing food and maintaining your energy will help you survive longer. Cook glanced at him calmly. Tisk, Private Tam scoffed. What good will living a few more days do? Aren't we still stuck here, waiting to die? Might as well take this opportunity to enjoy ourselves. What if we manage to escape? Do you think such a great opportunity will happen to us? The Pacific Fleet officers and soldiers within the blockade zone had 2 distinct attitudes, one striving for survival, trying every possible way to escape, the other simply muddling through, seizing this precious opportunity to enjoy themselves. This might be their only chance to enjoy the privileges of high society. As the 2 men conversed, A figure streaked across the distant sky. It was none other than Iron Man, Tony Stark from the main universe, who had entered the Hawaiian blockade using a time machine. That's, Cook's pupils narrowed in astonishment. A man of steel, haven't we seen one before? Tam said nonchalantly. We've been told not to mess with Tony Stark's beachfront villa. There are multiple man of steel suits there. When the Pacific Fleet collects supplies from the Hawaiian Islands, conflict with the islanders is inevitable. The Provisional Council even extended an invitation to Pepper Potts, but she declined. Everyone knew the beachfront villa must contain a wealth of supplies, but with 10 men of steel suits guarding it, even a full-scale attack by the Pacific Fleet wouldn't yield any results. Risking life for a few supplies, in the current situation, which is still manageable, isn't foolish enough. If supplies were depleted to the point of becoming untenable, someone would surely take the risk. No, Cook shook his head and said firmly, the man of steel suit at the beachfront villa never left the villa, and it's a different model than this one. Cook's eyes suddenly lit up. It came from outside. It broke through the seal. Puff, a sharp pain shot through his lower back. Cook turned in disbelief, only to see Tam, who had always considered him his elder brother and senior, growling at him with a stern expression. I don't want this good time to end. I haven't had enough of those actresses, those rich men's women. He quickly drew his military dagger and shoved the man overboard. He watched helplessly as the body sank into the sea, carried away by the waves. Tam threw the dagger away. It would be hard to say when Cook's body was found elsewhere. People were dying on the island constantly, and conflicts were raging constantly. Most importantly, the higher-ups had no interest in intervening. It was as if they were hoping the soldiers would unleash their own chaos, saving them the trouble of taking action themselves. Hadn't they seen the ship's surveillance cameras turned off under the pretext of saving electricity? And the more energy-consuming radar had long been deactivated. Aside from the few armored vehicles at the beachfront villa, who else on the island could possibly attack the Pacific Fleet headquarters? The bigwigs of the fleet all lived in a camp under layers of security on the island, guarded by their own house-born sons. All these behaviors conveyed the signal of encouraging internal strife to the lower levels. Because one less person means one less food and water consumption. After killing the people, Tam looked at the steel armor in the air and revealed a hint of sneer. Even if they came from outside, how many people can they take away? Is it my turn? There is another chapter. Chapter 368. Tony from the main universe. Is my bad luck over? Hey, Tony. Upon receiving Jarvis' message, Pepper Potts immediately had it initiate a call request. The electrical signal couldn't penetrate the optical membrane blocking the entire island, but it could move freely within the blockade. Sorry, I'm Tony from another universe, though I'm glad you're looking forward to it. Tony Stark from the main universe was full of flirtatious chatter. Who wouldn't want to flirt with a wife 10 years their junior? How did you get in? Can you get out? How's Tony doing? Pepper peppered her with 3 questions in a row, their order clear. The other one would be disappointed for a long time if I heard the order of your questions. Tony sighed, thinking that old couples were better. At least in Pepper's heart, their daughter Morgan came first, he came second, and he came third. Stop talking nonsense, and speak. Pepper feigned anger, trying to cover up the situation. Just wait. If I can find a key person, everyone will have a chance to escape. Tony from the main universe had already found Hank Pym's villa by searching the Hawaiian authorities' database. As the founder of a major corporation, Hank Pym naturally possessed numerous businesses across the United States. His initial decision to seek refuge in Hawaii was driven by the same rationale as Tony Stark's. Reluctant to endure the humiliation of a foreign nation, yet unwilling to join either side in the Civil War, he happened to have a villa in Hawaii, which he considered a vacation getaway. Hank's family consisted of a daughter and an elderly servant. After Hawaii was blockaded and faced with a chaotic situation, Hank Pym was forced to redon his Ant-Man uniform, relying on force and pre-stocked supplies to eke out a living. As the Iron Man armor landed at the villa's entrance, Hank, in his Ant-Man uniform, suddenly grew larger and roared at Tony, "Get out of here! Whoever you are, hey, Dr. Hank, it's me, Tony, from the main universe," quickly raised his hands, opened his visor, and shouted, "Tony Stark. Howard's son, I should call you Uncle Hank. Oh, shit. The air stinks." Tony quickly closed his visor again, conscious of the poor air quality. Hank, barely transformed into a giant, returned to life size, clutching his chest and gasping for air. "Uncle Hank, are you alright?" Tony's face was filled with concern. There was no pretense, for he absolutely didn't want anything to happen to him. Why are you hiding out here with me instead of on the West Coast? Although he had once clashed with Howard Stark, they were still old acquaintances. When Tony was born, he had presented gifts as an elder and even held him in his arms. So, after confirming his identity, Hank lowered his guard. He had been worried it might be someone else. After all, many in this universe possess Iron Man armor. I came in from outside, Tony said bluntly. I have a way to get you and Miss Hope out of the restricted area. Hank Pym was startled. Then, with incredible speed, he leaped over and grabbed Tony's hands, as if afraid he'd escape. What did you say? You can come and go freely in the restricted area. Can we talk inside? Tony pointed to the door and explained, these things aren't meant to be discussed outside. Hank quickly ushered them inside. Inside the room, Hope Dane, shotgun in hand, remained vigilant. They'd had a rough few days, having fought off numerous insurgents who tried to break in and steal their food. Instructing a servant to bring Tony a cup of tea, Hank removed the helmet from his Ant-Man uniform and waved the servant away. Tony tapped the switch on his chest, and the nano-components swarmed toward the storage compartments on his chest. Nano-armor. Hope raised her gun again, pointed it at Tony, and shouted, You're not Tony Stark. Wow, Miss Hope, be careful. Tony quickly explained, I am indeed Tony Stark, but not the Tony Stark of this universe. He then had Friday project a video previously recorded in New York, showing two different Tony Starks arguing. He's the Tony Stark of your universe. His technology is inferior to mine, which is why he couldn't develop the nano-armor, Tony, from the main universe, boasted. As for me, I'm from a parallel universe, and our timeline has reached 2023 AD, parallel universe. X2 Hank and Hope, father and daughter, exchanged a look of shock. They were no physics novices, they knew about the concept of parallel universes, but they had only seen theories and never verified it. Tony immediately pulled out his time machine and extracted the last of his Pym particles, explaining it to them. Using Dr. Hank's invention of the Pym particles, I designed a device that can travel to other universes. Incredible. Hope took the time machine from Tony's hand, her face filled with curiosity and astonishment. Quantum realm. Hank froze for a moment, then looked at Tony, demanding, Can this device allow me to freely enter and exit the quantum realm? When it comes to the love-struck men of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Hank Pym is undoubtedly the number one. His wife had been accidentally trapped in the quantum realm for decades, yet he had never betrayed her. Despite his immense wealth, he hadn't once cheated on her, even as his wife sought other men for gratification within the quantum realm. This clearly demonstrates Hank Pym's devotion to his wife, and he would resort to any means necessary to rescue her. Now, hearing about a device that allows unfettered access to the quantum realm, how could he not be thrilled? Exactly, Tony nodded, immediately realizing, you want to retrieve Aunt Janet, but something happened to you in our universe, and we only have a few Pym particles left. I have them, Hank asked eagerly. How many do you want? The mission went surprisingly smoothly, and Tony, whose recent run of bad luck had been lingering, thought perhaps his run of bad luck had finally come to an end. The search for Aunt Janet in the quantum realm can wait until I bring you back to New York. After all, the space here in Hawaii is too small, the resources are not many, and most importantly, the air is too bad. Tony was afraid that Hank would not want to go from a small blockade area to a large blockade area, so he deliberately said, my equipment needs to return to Stark Tower to debug the coordinates, otherwise it will be lost in the quantum realm. No problem, we will go with you now. When we go to the mainland, I can continue to create Pym particles. Hank is now thinking about his wife who has been missing for many years. Why would he care about going to a new cage? Hope, take Judy, let's leave here together. Hank still has a conscience and has not forgotten the old servant at home. Okay, Hope was also very happy to hear that he could leave this cage and see his mother again. That's all for today, and we will continue with 4 updates tomorrow. Chapter 369 Hogwarts' Position. Fast forward a moment. Just as Tony Stark from the main universe was seeking support in blockaded Hawaii, Hogwarts headmaster Tom arrived in the blockaded New York City. In Queens, at George Stacy's villa, 2 parents met the renowned headmaster of a magic school for the first time. Are you Headmaster Riddle? Aunt May said, a little embarrassed. The only important figure she had ever encountered was the approachable Commissioner George. During election years, state legislators and congressmen, seemingly down to earth but actually aloof, were willing to shake her hand only because of her beautiful face and graceful figure. This man before them was the headmaster of Earth's only supernatural school, a person many influential figures had longed to meet but hadn't had the chance. "Yes, Tom Riddle," Headmaster Tom said, with the air of a classic British gentleman, reserved yet trying to appear approachable. "You two chat first. I'll get some tea." Aunt May knew that a prominent figure like Tom had come specially for a home visit, most likely to discuss something with George Stacy. As a common housewife, she couldn't get a word in. Trusting the impeccable Commissioner George to consider her daughter and Peter, she volunteered to take on the housekeeping duties. In these chaotic times, the fact they were willing to let her stay and provide food and water was a significant favor. Most importantly, Commissioner George had always been a gentleman, never harboring any inappropriate thoughts towards her. Even his gaze was remarkably clear. This deeply touched Aunt May, even to the point of respect. "Mr. Riddle," Commissioner George stepped forward to shake Tom's hand. Tom only had a glance, and he saw through Commissioner George's secret. No wonder the host cared so much about this guy. It turned out this family had been under scrutiny for a long time. "You're welcome, Mr. Stacy. I'm here today to discuss something with you personally." The two took their seats, with the three little ones standing nearby. "Gwen has already told me that Hogwarts magic can freely enter and exit the blockade," Director George said straight to the point. He suspected the headmaster of the prestigious magic school had made a special home visit to have something to do with this matter. "Gwen, Peter, and Ned are incredibly talented and hard-working. They are the only 3 American students at the school who have mastered apparition," Tom pointed out. Director George paused for a moment, then looked up into Tom's penetrating gaze and asked tentatively, "Are they free to choose their side? Or are they bound to Hogwarts's?" It was now known worldwide that America was sealed off by a mysterious membrane. Even those within the blockade, having witnessed several high-altitude nuclear explosions, knew that those outside had discovered their containment. Even humanity's most powerful weapons couldn't penetrate this membrane, and the Americans within the blockade were increasingly despairing of escape. But now, a method had emerged that could bring people in and out of the blockade. Anyone with a reasonable mind could see the value of such a method. If the news were public, Americans within the blockade would undoubtedly descend upon the 3 little ones. Even American dignitaries who had previously fled abroad would do everything they could to negotiate with Hogwarts. After all, this was a nation, and they would undoubtedly be willing to pay a high price. We were all adults, and we weren't naive enough to assume that Hogwarts wizards should help Americans for free. Tom Riddle had made a special trip to negotiate with me, clearly having his own demands regarding the 3 little ones. Hogwarts does have its own stance, but the school won't force them to make choices against their will. Tom pulled out his staff, and a cloud of mist erupted from the tip, projecting an image of Houston. "The school is aware of the 3 children's personalities, and we're also aware of Director George's actions. I know you're all kind-hearted people." Looking at the projected image before him, Director George smiled wryly and shook his head. "Is this Hogwarts's position? It seems the rumors are true. Children from poor families have made up the majority of students admitted to the magic school over the past 2 years. That's hard to believe. Did the wizards of ancient legends prefer students of noble birth? Because my Hogwarts is different from some schools that prioritize bloodlines." Headmaster Tom was now incredibly proud. Although his master's request went against his previous pursuit of pure bloodism, Dumbledore's Hogwarts remained shackled to traditional aristocratic or magical families, while he had broken with tradition to bring magic to a wider range of common people. He was incredibly proud. The pride of defeating Dumbledore fairly and squarely filled him with unprecedented satisfaction. Pure bloodism be damned. How could the childish Dark Lord compare to his great headmaster Tom? "Okay," Chief George said after a long silence, finally making only one request. "I want to go to Houston and see for myself. Seeing is believing, after all," and George wanted to see if Captain Zhen's liver stream was just a sham. "Okay, I'll take them too," Tom said, gesturing to the 3 little ones standing nearby. A moment later, Tom led all 4 of them to Houston. Houston had now returned to social order. Elderly men and women wearing red armbands patrolled the streets daily, and every neighborhood had a new army stationed, engaged in both training and labor. These weren't the traditional armies that opposed the people, but rather, they were the sons and nephews of the families themselves, taking the lead in the labor. George couldn't believe his eyes as he saw uniformed soldiers chatting and laughing with ordinary civilians, working together on the road construction crew. Could this be the American army? While not as powerful as the one across the ocean, it was already in its infancy. Looking at the factories and farms that had resumed production, George fell into a long silence. He wasn't considered bourgeois, having previously been considered upper middle class at best. However, due to his innate empathy for ordinary people, he considered family, colleagues, and neighbors to be crucial parts of life. He was by no means a sophisticated egoist, nor a rentier who disregarded the lives of ordinary people. He was a rare good man in the Marvel Universe. Therefore, he was willing to sacrifice his life to protect these important things. He was also willing to stay in New York City when all the top police officers fled abroad. He even did everything he could to maintain order in New York City during the lockdown and obtain precious survival supplies for ordinary residents. But he could only do so much. Ordinary New Yorkers could only barely survive. Far inferior to the prosperity in Houston. Take me to see the real Captain America. After much deliberation, George finally made his decision. Hogwarts chose Houston, meaning that the real Captain America would master the magic of free entry and exit from the lockdown. Chapter 1. Don't worry, the next chapter will reveal it. Everything is to make America burn in fire. Director Lin doesn't care whether it can be reborn or not. What is important is the process of being burned in fire. Chapter 370. Good Samaritan. Ivan Vanko. Tony Stark from the Prime Universe thought his bad luck was over, unaware that opening champagne at halftime was a taboo. After years of quiet training, Ivan Vanko donned his multi-upgraded armor, which not only possessed all the abilities of the Blood Edge armor, but also possessed magical patterns, chakra energy, and even sword-wielding techniques from Mount Shu. Tisk tisk, Tony Stark, I actually feel a little sympathy for you, Ivan Vanko chuckled unkindly. He had learned from Lin Hao that the base universe had broken free from the influence of the Marvel Universe and would never again face the interference of the authority dogs. Naturally, he wanted to let his old rival experience the true meaning of despair. While Tony from the Prime Universe fled to Hawaii to search for Hank Pym, Ivan Vanko quietly appeared at Hank's villa, using magic and ninjutsu to become invisible and record the entire conversation. The footage even captured high-definition footage of the four of them using the time machine to disappear inside the house. After receiving first-hand information, Ivan Vanko turned and tossed the contents to the high-ranking officers of the Pacific Fleet and the dignitaries of the Hawaiian Provisional Council. What the hell? They're able to enter and exit the blockade zone freely. And all the American dignitaries trapped in Hawaii could no longer maintain their composure. They had had enough of this fishbowl existence. The blockade zone was limited in space, overcrowded, and lacking wetlands or forests to maintain air quality, leaving the air already stagnant. The wealthy and powerful could only retreat to air-conditioned rooms, breathing filtered air, but the filtration was steadily deteriorating. While marine algae could produce oxygen, underwater algae struggled to absorb toxic gases from the air, as the gases dissolved into seawater in a slow process. The high-ranking officials had had enough of this half-human, half-ghost existence. Who could remain silent after discovering someone was freely entering and exiting the blockade zone? Pacific Fleet Commander Robert Wilder immediately summoned his trusted subordinate, Cliff Taylor, and issued a direct order: take a few men, those you can absolutely trust, and proceed immediately to the East Side Villa. Cliff, having done plenty of dirty work for his superior, understood the importance of this operation from his superior's tone and demeanor. He immediately selected a few trusted confidants and drove out of the camp. Why should he continue to obey in such a situation? Why not rebel? Cliff's position, qualifications, and prestige weren't enough to subjugate the other factions and take control of the vast Pacific Fleet after killing Robert Wilder. The risks of rebellion would outweigh the benefits of remaining a trusted henchman. The streets of Hawaii were deserted. Military Humvees were driving recklessly, paying no attention to the abandoned, broken-down vehicles in the middle of the road. They would ram smaller vehicles directly into them, only to drift and spin larger vehicles they couldn't reach. It wasn't long before Cliff arrived at a villa his superior had designated, only to discover that several other groups had already arrived. A massive military organization like the Pacific Fleet wouldn't set up camp in a downtown area. At most, they'd leave an office space, and even then, they wouldn't be concentrated on a single island. Each major island in the archipelago had its own dedicated facilities. They rushed from the suburbs, crossing the city, so naturally, they weren't as fast as the city's elite. Cliff glanced around and saw they were all familiar faces. As Robert's trusted henchman, he must be a prominent figure in Hawaii. The other members of his team, upon noticing him, rushed forward to greet him, forcing smiles. General Cliff, long time no see. Cliff was only a brigadier general, but at a time like this, there was no need for formality. It seems we're here for the same reason. Cliff glanced around and saw that the people behind them were all Hawaii's true dignitaries. Probably. The higher-ups didn't say anything, they just asked us to come and see if Hank Pym and his daughter were still there. After inspecting the villa, the clever man suddenly realized the dignitaries' purpose. The villa was empty. Hank Pym and his daughter, Hope Dane, were gone. The kettle in the kitchen was even still hot, but the villa's occupant was gone. Report, we've found their cache of food and water. Now, even the slowest to react understood the truth. Hank Pym, who had been staying in the blockade like them, had vanished with his daughter. Where could they have gone? If they were still inside, how could they abandon their precious food and water? That only meant they had left. They'd actually found a way out. Realizing this, everyone on all sides pulled out their phones and reported the situation to their bosses. After the sudden appearance of the video footage was confirmed, the American dignitaries within the blockade were in an uproar. We can get out, haha, we can get out, great, finally there's a way out. As long as there was a way, they could enjoy it. In the past, how many resources on Earth hadn't been enjoyed by people like them? The other guy is Tony Stark. Quick, get to the beach house and capture Pepper Potts. Don't let her get away. Hank Pym had already come up empty-handed. Now, only Pepper Potts was a bargaining chip. Otherwise, she'd quietly come in and leave with her men, leaving them stranded in their fishbowl waiting to die. In a moment like this, what was the threat of 10 Iron Man suits? After all, they weren't going to fight the war themselves. So, the Pacific Fleet, the National Guard, the Hawaii Police Department, and the former federal law enforcement agencies trapped in the blockade all swung into action, encircling Tony Stark's beach house. Miss Potts, we're being targeted by the military, the police, the FBI, the IRS, the CIA. No need to give names, Pepper Potts interrupted Jarvis, grimly glancing at the screen. Every law enforcement agency in Hawaii had arrived. They must have discovered that Tony, as the person in charge of Stark Industries, Pepper is not a fool. With such a big scene before her, the only possibility is that someone has discovered the means of freely entering and leaving the blockade area. Ms. Potts, we hope to talk to you. A big shot from the Provisional Parliament walked out of the queue and faced the defense line formed by 10 steel armors. As the saying goes, courtesy comes before force. It would be better if you can convince the other party with some conditions. Pepper Potts was silent for a moment, and sent a message through the steel armor outside. Come in alone. Being able to talk is naturally a good thing. The two sides began to negotiate, or to conspire in the secret room. The big shots did not even disclose the reason to the executive personnel outside who participated in the blockade. Fortunately, there were kind-hearted people who recorded this ugly scene for all civilians in the blockade area. Chapter 2. Chapter 371 Ivan Vanko, isn't the public's right to know one of the American freedoms? After Tony Stark from the main universe brought Hank Pym, his daughter, and his elderly servants back to Stark Tower in New York, the Central gained possession of a large quantity of Pym particles. Tony Stark from this universe immediately grabbed 2 tubes, loaded them into his self-developed time-space shuttle, and set about setting coordinates. Hey, why don't you give it a try? Tony from the main universe kindly suggested. It's a new product, after all, haha, I believe in my skills. The proud Tony refused to bow down to his future self 10 years later. He was the most powerful Tony Stark in the multiverse. Other Starks could only take down a few gang leaders, but look at him. He started with the invincible East, then took on aliens and dimensional demons. Within a few months, the difficulty doubled. The other Starks were weak. Without a word, he pressed the start button, and Tony from this universe vanished, reappearing outside his Hawaiian beachfront villa. Tony Stark was stunned by the dense swarm of armed men surrounding him. What's going on? Why are there so many people outside my house? Since 10 unmanned armored vehicles were already guarding the perimeter of the villa, Tony's sudden appearance only caught the attention of the armed personnel whose sights happened to be fixed on that area. Most people didn't realize what this scene signified, or even felt dizzy, until someone quickly counted and realized, 10, 11. Why is there one more? Ivan Vanko, hiding in the shadows and recording everything, smiled knowingly. Interesting. What a coincidence. He held back from revealing the truth immediately, knowing Tony Stark would soon be alerted by the AI, and he was more eager to capture the scene of him conspiring with the powerful. That would be even more explosive. As he expected, the Jarvis main and subsystems, having re-established contact, immediately alerted Tony Stark, "Sir, do not show any signs of abnormality. I will command the other two suits to float over and activate optical camouflage for you as we cross paths. Please enter the villa stealthily." Is anyone in the villa? Who is Pepper meeting? Tony immediately realized, how could this information be leaked? Realizing something was amiss, Tony obeyed Jarvis's instructions and handed over control of his suit. As the other two suits flew over, he activated optical camouflage and silently floated towards the rooftop entrance for the suits. Inside the villa, Pepper Potts was negotiating with a member of the Provisional Parliament. The negotiations were nothing more than exorbitant demands and unrequited demands. Hawaii's powerful people, wanting to leave their fishbowl, would surely come at a price. Both Pepper and the councilman were delighted to see Tony Stark suddenly appear. "Tony," Pepper threw herself at him, hugging him tightly and refusing to let go. Had there been no one else around, she would have immediately engaged him. The excited congressman waited patiently, witnessing Tony Stark, who had not been in the restricted area, suddenly appear, proving he truly had a way to enter and exit freely. "Okay, tell me what happened here first." Tony patted his girlfriend's shoulder, calming her. Somehow, they discovered that another Tony had just arrived in Hawaii and taken Hank Pym and his daughter with him, Pepper quickly explained. Tony frowned and immediately questioned the Hawaiian congressman. "I want to know how you found out." The congressman's expression remained unchanged, his thoughts swirling. He replied calmly, "To better protect the talented people on the island, the Provisional Parliament and the Pacific Fleet have focused on the safety of certain homes, such as Mr. Stark's and Dr. Pym's villas." He was no fool, someone who could quietly capture Tony Stark and Hank Pym's secret negotiations and then quietly deliver these items to them must be no ordinary person. Why should people who eat chicken care where the chicken comes from? What's the matter? Is it because you want to persuade people to change their ways and then eat king chicken? They should be thanking them, not offending them. Bullshit. Tony didn't believe a word of it and snarled, "Tell me the truth, or else, Mr. Stark." The congressman's smile remained, but his voice suddenly rose. "Watch your words." Pepper tugged at her boyfriend's clothes and shook her head slightly. Tony's expression darkened, and he finally dared not utter another harsh word. He couldn't just sit by and watch these people die in Hawaii, otherwise, why would he bother nagging them? He hugged Pepper, then rushed to Happy, the producer man, not far behind him. He vanished in an instant, leaving Jarvis to initiate the self-destruct sequence. Isn't that the end? Since he couldn't bring himself to be ruthless, he was bound to cooperate and negotiate terms. He was, after all, a member of the American capitalist class, and he had a kind heart that couldn't bear to see widespread casualties. Of course, he was destined to only give priority to the powerful. Everything was just as Ivan Vanko had predicted. A good Samaritan hiding in the shadows had obtained footage of Tony negotiating a price with a congressman. He decisively used the more advanced AI to bypass Jarvis's control of the 10 warframes outside the house. Without Jarvis's knowledge, he controlled the warframe's playback functions, simultaneously broadcasting the footage and audio of the negotiations inside. "No, you're too many. This amount won't even cover the cost of the key raw materials. Are you kidding? The mainland is also under lockdown. It's not certain the raw materials you mentioned are still in their possession. Don't embarrass yourself by using overseas resource points. Everyone knows they can't be contacted right now." Tony spoke some of the words, Pepper did the talking for him. The councilman also produced multiple phones, allowing other powerful figures behind the scenes to negotiate directly with the Stark couple. Their lively conversation was unaware that the entire process was being broadcast live. Because the villa had been sealed off for renovation, no sound could be heard. Only then did the armed men outside, who were participating in the operation, realize what was happening. What are they talking about? What about the quotas and order of departure? Are you an idiot? It's obvious that Tony Stark has the technology to freely enter and exit the blockade. What fuck? These damn bigwigs are trying to abandon us and run off again, son of a bitch. Why? Because I'm born noble. Bullshit, no one in this world is born noble. The furious armed men pulled the trigger, and bullets and shells pounded the sealed villa. The 10 armored suits controlled by Ivan Vanko remained unmoved. The explosion tore open the villa's outer wall, revealing the stunned and panicked bigwigs inside. "Jarvis, what the hell are you doing?" Tony immediately put on his armor and handed Pepper to Happy. "No, sir, someone bypassed my firewall." Jarvis' voice was filled with anxiety. "Someone's playing tricks." Tony flew into the air, piercing the smoke and rubble. He looked around and shouted, "Who's that? Stop hiding like a rat." Ha 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 ha. A pure white suit of armor suddenly soared into the sky, its jet propulsion system invisible. It simply floated upward. Ivan Vanko opened the armor's visor, revealing his true form. Tony was shocked. "How could it be you? Don't be so surprised. I just came back to life." Ivan Vanko waved his hand nonchalantly, pointed to the angry armed personnel from various departments below, and said with a smile, "You should think about how to appease these angry people now, bastard." Tony didn't care about being surprised at the resurrection of his old rival, and gritted his teeth and said, "Why did you do this, huh?" Ivan Vanko pretended to be surprised, and questioned Tony with a curious baby expression. "Isn't protecting the people's right to know one of the freedoms advocated by the United States? I'm practicing the American spirit that you advocate." "What? Is your so-called American spirit different once it involves your own interests?" Chapter 3. There is still one chapter. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 372. This time, blood flows like a sea. Faced with his old rival's questioning, Tony Stark was speechless. How could he respond? The livestream was still fresh in his mind. There was no point in lying. "Asshole, I'm going to kill you." Unable to contradict his own words and actions, Tony Stark could only vent his anger on a more visible enemy. If he couldn't destroy the truth, he would destroy the body that represented it. This was very American. "Look everyone, he's getting angry, he's getting angry." Ivan Vanko pointed at the exasperated Tony Stark and shouted to the armed men below, "Your Iron Man is going to eliminate the kind-hearted people who are telling everyone the truth, right before your eyes." Seizing the moment of astonishment from the armed men below, Ivan Vanko extended a hand, dove him beside the darting Tony Stark, and delivered a powerful slap to his face. The blow struck Tony Stark's face. Withstanding the immense force, Tony Stark's armor crushed the villa below, plunging into the basement and creating a massive crater. "Mr. Sir," Jarvis' voice broke in a halting voice. Evidently the slap had shattered the hardware within the suit. The immense force impacted Tony Stark's body, causing a sweet sensation in his throat and a spurt of blood, which was then blocked by his mask. Tony, Pepper rushed forward recklessly. The Hawaiian congressman, who had taken shelter under the bar counter, seized the opportunity to escape and shouted to the armed personnel from various departments, "Quick, kill him!" He pointed at Ivan Vanko in the air. He was now preoccupied with protecting Tony Stark, completely ignoring the Good Samaritan who had passed on the message. Even if the Good Samaritan had been able to freely enter and exit the cordoned-off area, judging by their attitude, they clearly wouldn't cooperate. Therefore, they had to be eliminated. Unfortunately, no one obeyed his orders. From the air, Ivan Vanko casually fired a beam of light, blasting the man's head, putting an end to his cries. He then floated above the ruins, gazing down at Tony Stark in the pit below with a scornful sneer. "Our feud has only just begun. Don't worry. You'll witness the fall of America with your own eyes, and only then will I take your life." He then glanced at the armed men below and declared, "You all saw this. Tony Stark possesses the technology to freely enter and exit the blockade, but he only wants to benefit the powerful, while leaving so many civilians to die in the increasingly deteriorating air. Do you think this is fair? If you think it's unfair, don't you have weapons? I remember the U.S. Constitution gives you the right to use them to fight injustice." With these words, Ivan Vanko quietly vanished. The armed men surrounding the villa were unpredictable, as if weighing their options. Tony Stark's consciousness was fading, and Pepper Potts, worried about him, had made a decision she would regret for the rest of her life. "Happy, get the equipment." She actually ordered Happy to fetch the time machine Tony had just distributed, then pressed the start button to take Tony away to the preset coordinates. Although Happy was known as the producer man, he was ultimately just a bodyguard. What could he possibly know? Seeing his master disappear, he followed suit without a word. The armed men weighing the pros and cons outside finally realized what had happened. Unsurprisingly, their fury was ignited like kerosene. "They're leaving, abandoned again, ho ha ho ha. Damn this world. Damn America." Destroy it all. Gunfire and artillery roared, and smoke spread from the beachfront villa to all Hawaii. Like a zombie virus, the mad armed men spread in all directions, destroying everything they encountered and, driven by rage, heading towards wealthy areas and even the Pacific Fleet camp. The Pacific Fleet also deployed personnel in this encirclement. These enraged soldiers immediately relayed the news back to their base camp, where their comrades rushed to the armory and even to the warships at the airfield and harbor. Whether venting their anger or protecting themselves in the chaos, they needed real weapons. This was valuable experience they had accumulated through countless chaotic encounters. However, once they had real weapons, their anger became a spark that turned into flames. Missile tubes on the USS George Washington and USS Lincoln suddenly opened, and two massive Tomahawk missiles soared into the air, hurtling towards the headquarters camp on shore. When the villa complex housing the Pacific Fleet's top officers was engulfed in flames, it was like the sound of the Aurora's cannon. The largest armed group in the Hawaiian Islands had lost control, unleashing a bloody massacre. These faithless, undisciplined, and abandoned soldiers staged a modern-day version of the camp cry. This time, the blood flowed not as a river, but as an ocean. As the bombardment continued, Hawaii, once a tourist destination, was transformed into veritable hell on earth. Even the surprise attack 70 years earlier hadn't brought such horrific scenes. Hawaii's powerful and influential people reaped the fruits of their own actions, becoming victims of this inferno. Was this outcome surprising? Not at all. Good Samaritan Ivan Vanko floated in the Hawaiian sky, faithfully documenting everything. His American collapse plan wasn't over yet. Such a commotion naturally alarmed countries outside the blockade, and they deployed satellites to capture the Hawaiian blockade. Dear viewers, new developments within the Hawaiian blockade. Oh my god, our Americans finally giving up and going crazy. Tisk tisk, this is too tragic, truly too tragic. No, I need to go get some water, I need to shed a few tears. The unrest in Hawaii raged for hours, and the flames of the inferno burned for hours. As the centrist superheroes rescued the unconscious Tony Stark, the blocked American television station's signal was hijacked once again. The screen showed the true reactions of Hawaii's elite upon learning someone possessed the technology to freely enter and exit the blocked zone, followed by scenes of their negotiation with Tony Stark, and finally, images of enraged armed men unleashing their wrath upon Hawaii. Steve Rogers from the main universe froze for a moment, then roared at Tony Stark and Pepper Potts from this universe. What have you done? Seeing the subsequent devastation in Hawaii, Pepper finally realized the consequences of her immediate departure and fainted with tears. Tony Stark, accustomed to the abuse he'd endured over the years, had developed a steely nerve. After a moment's silence, he finally couldn't resist Steve's barrage of accusations and sneered back, "How about a draw to decide who goes first?" "Why not?" Steve from the main universe continued to roar. "We can easily transport food and water and keep everyone alive, haha. Where are you going to get enough food and water for over 2 million people?" Tony from this universe started with a pointed question. "Houston, also, you don't think the production of PIM particles is free, do you?" Steve from the main universe was speechless. "Only a small number of people in the Hawaiian blockade are destined to emerge. Who do you think should be chosen?" Tony from this universe delivered a brilliant retort. Chapter 4, to be continued tomorrow. Chapter 373, They Deserve to Die. Houston, Lone Star Republic Central Conference. The elders, newly arrived in Houston from the Hell Base, were stunned into silence by the images on the television screens, stunned by the devastation in Hawaii. Lin Hao, under the guise of Tom Riddle, opened a portal connecting the blockade zone and the Hell Dimension. Without hesitation, the true captain, Steve Rogers, ordered all personnel in the Hell Base to be transferred back to Houston. The Hell Dimension, after all, wasn't Earth. Although the true captain had used magic and technology to create a livable environment, prolonged stay there inevitably led to suffocation and even psychological problems. Therefore, regular rotations had been made for fresh air. The Hell Base was only a temporary measure. Now that he had a real base, the true captain naturally had to devote all his resources to transferring everyone to the Red Zone. Haha, as expected, anyone who harbors hope in the American elite must be a fool. Some of the attendees fell silent, their heads bowed in shame. These people either desired a quick victory or lacked the resolute resolve for armed struggle, clinging to the idea of compromising with the American elite and then peacefully transforming America. This is a common sentiment among all immature teams. How many people are born steadfast? It's through repeated compromise, deception, and resistance that they gradually abandon their illusions and strengthen their convictions and the team's principles. Enough, the real captain, sitting at the head of the group, scowled, shouting to stop the quarrel. Organize people to follow me to Hawaii to rescue people. There are definitely survivors there, even in the aftermath of a nuclear explosion, there would be survivors. How much more so in the Hawaiian Islands, where nearly 3 million people were crammed in at once. There were surely many lucky survivors. These people were natural supporters of the Lone Star Republic. Captain Zhen once again sought out Principal Tom, who opened a portal to Hawaii. This was a privilege granted to him by Lin Hao. The pale blue portal resembled the yellow phantom portal previously used by the Temporal Variance Administration. Passing through the portal with his elite strength, he saw nothing but rubble and ruin, flames raging everywhere, and billowing smoke. The sounds of gunfire, sometimes short and sometimes intense, mingled with faint moans and wails. You save them, I'll stop them from fighting. Captain Zhen flapped his wings, soaring into the sky. He then cast a spell, conjuring a gigantic figure, a perfect likeness of himself. I'm Steve Rogers. Everyone, cease your fire. I have a way to get you out of the blockade, please believe me. I won't abandon you like the Hawaiian dignitaries did, his resounding voice echoed, and the frantic Hawaiians paused for a moment. Who is this guy? Trying to trick us again. Some paused, but others, unwilling to believe, seized the opportunity to accelerate their attack. They had no purpose in fighting, they simply vented their anger, killing or being killed, venting their fear, anger, and helplessness through this process. Seeing their shouting lacked any effect, Captain Zhen projected a video of the team members at the light gate rescuing the trapped and carrying the wounded one by one through the light gate, so that everyone could witness it. The portal out of the blockade area is on Kalikau Avenue. Those nearby can go immediately. First come, first served. There are no restrictions. Upon hearing these words, people in Honolulu's main city began to converge on Kalikau Avenue. There were some frantic individuals, but survival is human instinct, and the majority did not want to die. As long as they were still alive, as long as they had the strength to move, they rushed out of their hiding places to take a gamble. Hiding meant death anyway, so many were willing to fight for hope. If they were disappointed again, their nerves would probably break. Fortunately, the world had finally given them one last glimmer of kindness. A live projection in the air broadcast the scene from the portal. More and more people disappeared through the blue portal, while the surviving Hawaiians continued to flee from all directions towards the main city. Captain Zhen didn't stop in Honolulu, he traveled throughout the Hawaiian Islands, spending nearly a week to complete this massive rescue operation. Rows of prefabricated shelters had been erected in Houston to house the survivors evacuated from Hawaii. Captain, the total number is only 836,721, Matt Murdock, in charge of Lone Star Republic Internal Affairs, reported with a look of sorrow. I estimate not even a third of them have arrived. The Hawaiian Islands had already suffered heavy casualties in the first few days of the blockade. Although the fighting was brief, the Pacific Fleet's soldiers had directly employed high-powered weapons. Coupled with the desperate residents, many of whom were prone to self-destruction, they had no intention of seeking refuge in air raid shelters. Furthermore, existing shelters, such as these, had already been occupied by local Hawaiian gangs and strongmen, forming improvisations and cliques, days before the blockade began, severely hampering evacuation after the fighting began. Go find all the Hawaiian dignitaries. I'll judge them in front of all the survivors, Captain Xian shouted in a rage. If it weren't for these cowardly scoundrels who deliberately concealed the truth, the chaos in Hawaii might not have happened, or at least they could have held out until Hogwarts arrived to help open the portal. Among the over 800,000 survivors, there must have been some Hawaiian dignitaries who had escaped. Upon hearing Captain Xian's call, they rushed out of the sturdy basement, shamelessly blending in with the civilians and fleeing back to the mainland through the portal. Just as they were congratulating themselves on their survival, a group of Western factory eunuchs, wearing long swords and leather boots, approached the once almighty figure. Your story has been published. The survivors queuing for relief saw the Hawaiian dignitaries being dragged away like dead dogs, and after a moment's whispering, they realized who they were. It's them, it's these rubbish who want to abandon us. If it weren't for them, this chaotic battle wouldn't have broken out, and my poor child wouldn't have died. Kill them. Kill them. The survivors didn't even bother to eat, and left their teams one after another, surrounding these dead dog dignitaries. Captain Zheng walked up to the podium where the Houston dignitaries had been executed before, and said loudly, "My fellow compatriots, you should already know why everything that happened in Hawaii before. These bigwigs who used to enjoy the people's support, not only didn't want to save the people when the crisis came, but abandoned the people, escaped alone, and pushed innocent people into purgatory. They deserve to die." A shout immediately rang out from below the podium. "Kill them. Kill them. No, no. Don't kill us. Fuck you, you bastards. Do you know who I am? I am a descendant of the great Morgan family, untouchables. Thugs. Don't even think about hurting noble gentlemen. Our army will definitely come back and grind you to ashes." Some of the bigwigs pressed on the platform were crying and begging, some were shouting angrily, and some were shouting and cursing. When have they ever enjoyed such barbaric treatment? "Throw them down." Captain Zheng did not show any mercy this time. The Western factory eunuchs stretched out their legs and kicked these bigwigs off the platform. The survivors who were eager to eat their flesh rushed up from the stage. In the evening, the whole family went to Tengwang Pavilion to enjoy the moon, and I was still writing. Chapter 374, Without cheats, you are like a beast of burden. With cheats, you are still like a spirit beast of burden. Isn't that despicable? Captain Zheng made no secret of the execution of the Hawaiian elite. He had all local television stations in Houston broadcast it publicly via their own networks. This move served to demonstrate to the remaining elites across the United States that the Lone Star Republic would not compromise with him. While Captain Zheng's previous actions in Houston had a strong Red Army tone, politics has always been about compromise, and the military is an extension of politics. Elite members of other regions of the United States had not failed to view the Lone Star Republic as a new state government. As long as Captain Zheng was willing to preserve the independent autonomy of the states, they could have treated the Lone Star Republic with the same attitude they had toward the Eastern and Western Federations. But now, that was no longer possible. Captain Zheng had not only executed these powerful Hawaiian families, representing major American families, but had also openly declared war on the entire United States. From this day forward, the Lone Star Republic is officially at war with all political power within the United States. This was Captain Zheng's deliberate decision. The American mainland remains under blockade, and state governments are scrambling to clean up the mess. However, trust between the people and their governments is completely lacking, hindering their ability to unleash their wartime potential. Whether it's industrial or agricultural production or conscription, they all rely on human support. Amidst this chaos, public sentiment is unsettled. State governments haven't previously restored normal life and production, as Houston did. Now, with the revelations of the Hawaii incident, citizens in the mainland have lost even the last vestiges of trust in their governments. How can they realize their wartime potential? Seizing this opportunity, perhaps the Lone Star Republic could launch a nationwide offensive, quickly restoring peace to America. Captain Zheng was completely unaware of the potential for chaos that would result from a swift, decisive battle. He'd only been self-taught for 3 years, and his achievements were only possible thanks to his immense supernatural abilities. He hadn't considered how to maintain the purity of his government after peace. Captain Zheng even believed that by eliminating the corrupt elite and establishing a new America, peace and prosperity would inevitably follow. Of course, Lin Hao wouldn't teach him step by step. Whether America could resolve these problems or not was none of the devil's business. This was to become a battleground between the base universe and the Marvel multiverse. Lin Hao had already decided to anchor one base in the blockade created by Shen Ren, and the other in America. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is Earth 199,999. After all, America was the center of the universe. It deserved this treatment. After Captain Zheng officially declared war, he personally led his newly trained army, barely 2 weeks old, into offensive operations, capturing several other major cities in Texas and expanding his base from Houston to the entire state. As he'd predicted, even in the face of the Lone Star Republic's declaration of war, the remaining states and counties were unable to mount a strong defense, and even their former military and police forces were reduced to mere formalities. The state government's inability to restore production meant that supplies in the states were dwindling, not increasing. How could the military and police in those states continue to work with peace of mind? Maintaining the existing organization was difficult, let alone deploying them to battle against the highly motivated Texas New Army. After occupying all of Texas, Captain True marched eastward, targeting Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi. These 3 states, located in the Mississippi River floodplain, had historically been a major agricultural and pastoral region. In this blockaded state, agriculture and animal husbandry were crucial for population survival and reproduction, and the cornerstone of a regime's longevity. Since the Eastern and Western Unions had deployed a large number of troops along the Mississippi River defenses during the previous Civil War, Captain True's offensive was naturally difficult. We can't attack with force. Our new troops are undertrained, and their mastery of high-tech weaponry is far inferior to that of the two Civil War rivals. I believe we should use psychological warfare, publicize the tragic conditions in Hawaii and have survivors recount their experiences on the front lines. This tactic was not uncommon, having already been used on the battlefields of World War II. As a veteran of that war, even if he hadn't eaten pork, he had seen pigs run. A projection suddenly appeared over New Orleans, the exact footage captured during the rescue mission to Hawaii. Citizens of New Orleans, what you're seeing is what happened in Hawaii not long ago. A spaceship hovered in the night sky not far from the projection screen. Aboard it were Steve Rogers and Tony Stark from 2023, along with its owner, Carol Danvers. As agreed, we'll make one final attempt. If you can't convince him, immediately follow me to another dimension to retrieve the Space Stone and return home, Tony said solemnly to Steve. The Tony from 2023 was tired and unwilling to deal with this mad universe any longer. Let it be destroyed, who cares? Steve nodded dejectedly, his eyes etched with indelible weariness. He had once hoped to end the Civil War in this universe's America and reverse the spiraling situation. However, in less than a month, he had gradually come to realize the complexity of this universe. With his strength and knowledge, he simply couldn't save this America. Today, having learned that the real captain was about to launch a full-scale attack on New Orleans, he rushed over to try to dissuade him from his murderous intent. Carol, turn on the ship's loudspeaker, Carol explained. Carol, a self-proclaimed space policeman, also disapproved of the actions of the Hawaiian elite, but she couldn't follow the real captain's path of overthrowing the American system. Her established moral compass prevented her from killing the real captain. After all, he was this universe's Captain America, and she had grown up listening to his exploits. This conflicted mindset led Carol to choose to play it safe. After all, she was a centrist, not a completely elitist. After the loudspeaker on the spaceship was turned on, Steve from 2023 spoke. Mr. Rogers, I am you from another universe. We have all participated in wars, and we all know that war will only bring harm. We should find peaceful ways to solve any problems. Really? The voice of the real captain suddenly appeared over New Orleans, and directly retorted to Steve from 2023. I heard that half of the life in your universe was slaughtered by an alien, so have you tried to find a peaceful way to solve the problem with him? That's different. Thanos is an alien, Steve from 2023 argued. Your current target is your compatriots. I haven't figured out one question. The real captain was silent for a while, and suddenly asked him with a smile, why do you like to be a dog for the capitalists and the powerful? Steve in the spaceship frowned immediately, as if he was insulted. He has always considered himself a strong captain who can't bow his head and serve the powerful. Didn't you see clearly or understand the behavior of the capitalist elite? The real captain continued to retort. How long ago did the Hawaiian elite do what happened? Are you pretending not to see it? Are such a group of trash worthy of enjoying the people's offerings? Are they worthy of leading the America? Shouldn't such a group of beasts who regard human lives as worthless be overthrown? You can seek peaceful means. Steve from 2023 anxiously defended himself. Fuck the peaceful way. The real captain used magic to project his tall body and roared towards the location of the spaceship. Tell these beasts in a whisper that I want to overthrow them? Or kneel down and beg these beasts for some sympathy. If they still have a little sympathy for the lower-class citizens, they will not push the residents of Hawaii into hell. Steve Rogers, you are really a clown? They let us perform on the stage like monkeys in a circus, but you have never been able to jump off the unicycle they prepared for you. When we don't have superpowers, we have to work like slaves for the capitalists and the rich. After we have superpowers, we have to think about them everywhere, kneel down and beg for their support from time to time, and become spiritual slaves. Isn't it cheap? I can't hold it anymore. I will continue to pay off my debts tomorrow. Chapter 375 The Beginning of Multivariate War. The New Orleans night sky echoed with a sneer of the real Captain Steve Rogers, his mockery directed at his alternate universe self. The Steve from 2023 fell silent, even beginning to wonder if his motivation for stopping the enemy was a desire for peace or a subconscious resistance to the use of force against the powerful. Mr. Rogers, it seems you haven't convinced him, Tony from 2023 interrupted his thoughts. The way Captain America in this universe has become suggests that Steve Rogers possesses a deep-seated empathy for the underprivileged, a foundation for his reddening. What if their Steve is also affected? A good boy can't be led astray by a scoundrel from outside. Since we can't convince him, we should leave, Tony warned. There are people waiting for us back home, and half of all life in the universe is waiting to be saved. We should waste our time here, I know, Steve from 2023 said, his face filled with frustration. In less than a month, he had gone from ambition to helplessness, experiencing the greatest setback of his life. Once, no matter the odds or the adversaries, he remained unyielding, driven by his unwavering faith in justice, his unwavering belief that justice could not be defeated by evil. Even bruised and battered, he persevered. But this time, his opponent was another version of himself, and the conflict he faced was no longer a black and white one of good and evil. With identity and position becoming new variables in this conflict, the situation became infinitely more complex, leaving Steve, a soldier with only a basic mindset, unable to cope. For the first time in his life, Steve Rogers chose to escape. Some say escape, while shameful, can be effective. Unfortunately, Steve's escape was not only futile, but also marked the beginning of a painful life. Carol, once we've resolved our own issues, we'll bring the entire Avengers here and find a way to lift the blockade on America. Tony hadn't forgotten the America of this universe. However, he only mentioned lifting the blockade, not restoring peace to America, because he knew he couldn't do it. Most of the Avengers in the main universe are centrists. After all, they're superheroes, possessing basic moral values and a certain sympathy for the lower classes. They wouldn't resort to violent massacres of common people. The Lone Star Republic now has a population of over 5 million, most of whom are staunchly resentful of the powerful. Restoring America to its former state would require wiping them out completely, a move the superheroes couldn't possibly bring themselves to do. Besides, aside from Carol, which other Avengers could guarantee a victory over this universe's Steve Rogers? It would be better to find a way to lift the blockade on this America. Upon their return, the conglomerate bosses who'd fled abroad could decide whether to clean up the country or encircle and suppress them. American freedom, after all. Okay, Carol nodded, feeling a certain hope. She had no other options. Perhaps the Avengers from another universe could find a way to break the blockade. As for leaving, she hadn't considered it. This was her home. Tony picked up 2 time shuttles and approached Steve, who silently accepted one. Continue to our previous destination, New Jersey in the 1970s. After nearly a month of wandering, they finally returned to their starting point. Hank Pym had provided them with sufficient Pym particles and used a time machine to travel to the quantum realm to rescue his wife, who had been lost for decades. However, it was unclear whether the woman he brought back was the same one he had lost. Because the quantum realm connects the multiverse, any wasp who gets lost in the multiverse will fall into the quantum realm, just like the countless Kangs in the multiverse. Hank Pym in the base universe lost his wife, and so did Hank Pym in the main movie universe. Their wives were all in the quantum realm. But it didn't matter. The hardware and software were the same, and it would be even more exciting if they actually found one. Ready, Tony commanded. Go. The two immediately pressed the start button, and something magical happened again. Instead of shrinking to particle state and entering the quantum realm, their bodies formed a twisting vortex around them. What's going on? Tony stared. Again, Tony, stop. Steve sensed something was amiss. Come on, do you think I could have done this? Tony said, his face innocent, hands spread wide. This vortex, Carol watched it grow, filling the ship in the blink of an eye. Then, she felt a sudden pull and cried out in shock. Shit! Suddenly, the ship, which had been hovering steadily in the night sky, began to spin, turning upside down like a washing machine. What's going on? Captain Zheng watched in amazement from afar. The next second, the ship in sight was suddenly engulfed by a dark vortex. Captain Zheng had no idea what was happening, but he had to command the upcoming battle and had no time to focus on anything else. Carol's ship seemed to be on a fantasy journey. Each time it tumbled, it appeared in a different city, appearing and disappearing abruptly, leaving behind a constantly spinning vortex. These vortices hovered above every city, expanding at a visible speed. Before the Americans could react, They transformed into dark portals, each one carrying an eerie, ominous aura. Carol and the other two tumbled for an unknown amount of time, but when they finally came to rest over New York, dark portals appeared across the entire United States, encompassing all 48 states and every major city. Tony Stark, with his average physique, opened his mask and began vomiting uncontrollably upon stopping, completely oblivious to the mess he was making on the ship. Steve and Carol fared much better, the latter didn't even gag. Frequently traversing space, she was accustomed to these kinds of tumbling. Something's wrong, Carol, already at the control panel, searched through the ship's location information and the fleeting footage she had captured, and discovered something startling. Something really happened. Steve patted Tony, who was bent over and vomiting, and said in a deep voice, "You'd better come and take a look outside the Stark Tower." "What does it have to do with me?" Tony, who was bent over and vomiting, didn't care. "The Stark Tower here is not my one. No, the one opposite should be yours," Steve said with a wry smile. "The Stark Tower here has not been renovated, the one opposite has been renovated." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.